This is a true crime discussions channel. We speculate. This is all just speculation. Because it's true crime, it's for mature audiences only. There will be no children allowed, no exceptions. Everything on this channel falls under fair use. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. It's free.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I see Serena and Anders and Abellis and Eek and Joy and Zio. And is that everybody I see in chat? Yes, I think so. Thank you all for being here. Trixie. Hey. Hi, you guys. I'm about to go check on Basil actually right after I start this video because I think he's been under the table today. The bird scared him, but unfortunately, the bird passed away. I think she had some internal bleeding going on that I might not have known about. So I buried her. So we're going to start with the Delphi update for yesterday from the news station in that area. It is called WTHR. Please give them a like and subscribe. And after that, we will see what Benny Politan has been saying about this trial. I did get Michael Dunahee in there, Abellis, in the beginning and at the end on the missing children's video. I'll probably do a little bit of a better one. I was just trying to get that one out so that we would have a new one for today, an updated one. So I'm going to let this play. I'm going to go check on Basil real quick, and I will be right back.
Good evening to you from Carroll County. It is tonight's Delphi debrief, and we have a very special guest with us tonight, a very educated guest on this topic, I would say, too. Amy Graham McCarty from the Carroll County Comet. Welcome. We're glad that you're with us tonight. We are filling in for Bob and Emily, of course, election duty calls. So we're excited to be filling in for them tonight. We have a lot to talk about, but maybe first just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been very in on this case really from the beginning.
Yeah, so thanks, Samantha. I started covering this back in the beginning when I was working at another newspaper in Indiana. Being from this area, I grew up in Wabash, lived in Peru where my husband's family still resides for several years. And after traveling around as a journalist, came back to Indiana and was in Monticello for several years with Hoosier Media Group, which is owned by Don Hurd, and covered it exclusively for all of our newspapers throughout the state of Indiana. My husband's a pastor, and so we moved to Illinois, but when Don purchased the Carroll County Comet, he brought me back to relaunch the newspaper, and I've just continued covering the case ever since for him. So for me, it was only natural to come back here and see it through to its completion.
Well, we're glad you're here, and thanks for helping us debrief everything that happened on today, which was...
He's sitting under the table. The air blows under there, so I'm thinking that might be why he's under there. But if he's not up and running around soon, I'm going to be checking on him just to make sure he's okay. But that's the Basil update for today. Thank you, Trixie, for saying hey to everybody.
It's day 16, Tuesday here in Carroll County. And I think what we'll do first is just kind of run through the list of who we heard from today, the key witnesses that the defense called, like we said, on day 16. And then we'll kind of go into some of the detail because there was new information today. There was a lot of technical information, and we want to make sure you understand everything that happened. So let's put this up on your screen. We'll start with this first. The first witness we heard from today was a woman named Betsy Blair. She claims she visited the bridge the day the girls went missing. She says she was actually there a couple times. Not the first time we've heard from her. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Followed by today, Dr. Stuart Gracian, who is a psychiatrist. A lot of technical testimony we heard from him today regarding Richard Allen's mental state. We'll get into that. Then Dr. Eric Warren, a forensic scientist who talked a lot about firearms and crime scene reconstruction and what that looks like specifically with this case. And then lastly today, Stacy Eldridge, a digital forensic examiner, and consultant, and what the process looks like. And that's where we learned more about this new information, new digital data that we'll get into first. let's start at the beginning. If you don't mind, Amy, talking about Betsy Blair. Like you said, you've been covering this from the beginning. You were there a few days ago when we heard from Betsy the first time. So kind of walk us through who she is and then a little bit of what she talked about.
So Betsy Blair is one of the witnesses who claims to have seen what has been known now as Bridge Guy. She frequents the trail. She walks there often. She said on February the 13th that she visited the trail.
Anders says that Betsy Blair saw the Mercury Comet car. So that's the witness we're about to hear about. Thank you, Anders.
And was there for an extended amount of time. She likes to do 3 loops is what she said. So she did 2 loops. She left for about 30 minutes and then returned to the trail. It was then that she walked towards High Bridge. And when she got towards High Bridge, she has testified that she saw a man standing on the first platform. She said he looked at her, but wasn't really expecting her. He was looking for someone else, she said. She turned around and walked back the other way and returned to her car and then left. What they talked about with Betsy today, as the defense has now called her as a witness, was the vehicle that she may have seen when she left the trail. In fact, they didn't even talk to her about who she saw on the bridge that day. And so she claims that at the former CPS building, she saw a vehicle. She said that vehicle was parked unusually, meaning that she said it was close to the building and it was backed in. Most people just pull in and park. However, what's different from what we have heard before from other witnesses is Betsy says it was an older model sedan. It was very square. And in fact, they entered into evidence a drawing that she drew for police, and it was very square looking. She said it resembled an older car that she remembers her dad having back in the 60s. She said it was not bright in color. She could remember that, but she couldn't remember specifically what color it was. And the defense did try to have her read from her transcript from April 2nd, 20.
Yeah, Basil's good. I just made him get up. I just want to let y'all know I just made him get up just to make sure he was good, because sometimes they get lethargic when they're sick, and he got up. He's just under there where it's nice and cool. Hello, Paranormal Rooster. Thank you for being here.
2019 to see like what color was it specifically. And she says in 2019, I said it could not have been black. Why is that important? Because police say that Richard Allen's 2016 Ford Focus SC hatchback was on County Road 300 North the day that the girls went missing. And to fit in that timeline, that black vehicle needs to be traveling on the road at that time or be parked in that area. So that's kind of what she talked about. Now, Andrew Baldwin, defense attorney, did ask her if she thought the car that she saw that day was a hatchback, and she said she couldn't see the back of the car because it was backed in. But yeah, that just kind of is a rundown of what she said. Now, I think it's important to note that on cross-examination, Deputy Prosecutor Stacey Diener did ask her about another car that we have heard testimony about. That was an older model sedan that was parked about 2 feet off the road on County Road 300 North on the side closest to the highway. And she asked her, could that have been the car? And Betsy said she's not 100% certain if it could have been that. And what I think Diener was getting at, or what Stacey Diener was getting at, is did you maybe see that car on the road and not at the CPS building? But we never really got a concrete answer on that. With Betsy.
And keep in mind, of course, for any of these folks who are talking, right, we're talking about a memory or an instance that was more than 7.5 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But to her point, she said, what caught my attention about this vehicle in the first place was that, like she said, she passed through that area pretty frequently. She was familiar with the area, but this one vehicle that was parked a little different up close to the building kind of caught her attention, and not for her to remember it and talk about it moving forward. So,
and that's not the first time we've heard.
Hello, Exquisite. Thank you for being here. Are you exquisite? I'm sure you are. Thank you so much for being here.
Heard that. If you go back in some of the statements that have been released from other witnesses over the years, a lot of them say they saw a car backed in. And so I think that that's something that has stayed congruent through all of it as well.
Moving on to this next one, the next witness that the defense called today was Dr. Stuart Gracian. this was interesting. And you and I talked before on camera just about how impressive his resume was.
Yes.
A psychiatrist, not from the area, originally lives out in Boston, has several degrees, went to Harvard Medical, serves as a professor and instructor at times too.
Yes.
Very intelligent, very good credentials
Yes.
coming into this. And one thing that was very important to mention specifically when it comes to this case is his areas of interest, right? And he talked about solitary confinement being one, memory being another, and then false confessions. And of course, when you're thinking about the Delphi case specifically, and maybe how all three of those tie into Richard Allen and his experiences. And one of the quotes that this witness shared was, quote, "It's important to understand the mental state in cases like this." And then this is when he really kind of goes into what he talks about, having watched some of the videos, having listened to phone calls, read transcriptions of Richard Allen's time in confinement. And some of his findings were pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think, again, important to note, he did not personally assess Richard Allen. He used documentation from Dr. Walla. He used the report from Dr. Polly Westcott, who the defense had called as an expert witness in neuropsychology, to come to his conclusion. And so
Well, so why couldn't we have gotten this doctor to interview Richard Allen and gotten his expert opinion on the actual patient instead of on the doctor's notes? Because my feeling would be that you need to go in there and see the person yourself and make your own assessments instead of relying on somebody else's. Aw, that is so cool, Exquisite. That's so sweet. I like that.
he was getting ready to testify, the state entered a motion in limine
Nowhere near
to
Chicago.
restrict his testimony. And so basically, they didn't want him to testify specifically to any potential facts of Richard Allen's conditions in the jail because he never saw those. Right. He didn't personally meet with Richard Allen. And so they wanted to be very careful about that. Stacey Diener had mentioned that with Dr. Polly Westcott, she had perhaps made some statements that she shouldn't have. And she should have, in fact, Stacey Diener even said she should have known better for the number of times that she has testified as an expert. And she basically said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
And so I think that was very important coming into his testimony as well, as the state was being very careful about what they allowed in.
Yeah, so they raised those.
Hello, Anna. Anna says they are only allowed so much money for their experts, so they are limited on what they can do. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. And thank you for being here. Annie, I'm sorry, Annie, not Anna, but Annie.
Concerns actually right off the bat this morning.
Oh, thank you.
The judge
Jenny.
allowed this doctor to testify anyway. So we heard from him. And once he really got into the core of what he studies and specifically what he's seen when it comes to this confinement, when it comes to making false statements, he kind of got into what he considered the common symptoms of an extended period of time in solitary confinement. And
I just dropped the StreamYard link if anybody would like to come up on panel with me.
want to read you some of these because I think they're interesting. He talked about people who are in there for a long period of time being confused, not having memory, not knowing where they are, being hyper responsive to stimulation if they receive stimulation at all, even high rates of suicide, delirium. But then he named more specific details like smearing feces. He said, oddly enough, that's a very common situation when we're talking about folks like this, and being naked. And the reason we bring up those two was because from what we understand, jurors saw videos of Richard Allen in similar situations. So again, he did not specifically see Richard Allen. He never visited Richard Allen, but just describing some of these common symptoms that sound like what he experienced.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, again, you question how much information did he have going into this? Obviously, these were things that he read in a report on Richard Allen. But if those are indeed symptoms of delirium, symptoms of severe cases, then Richard Allen has exhibited that.
Yeah. And he specifically asked, when I say he, we're talking about defense attorney Brad Rosie. He said to this doctor, he said, so you listened to some of these calls, you read some of the transcriptions. I'm going to ask you point blank, did you notice symptoms of delirium in Richard Allen? To which he responded, absolutely yes.
Yes.
That was
Classic,
telling.
not a doubt. Yep. He did.
So then we go on to hear more from him. We hear a little bit of cross-examination. And again, something that we've talked about before on some of these Delphi debriefs is the questions from the jurors and how detailed and specific they can be. And we heard from one juror, a couple of them actually, they asked really good questions to this doctor. They said, can psychotic behavior go back to normal once you've been removed from one of these situations? And he responded, generally, yes. Another juror asked a similar question. Do you believe normal
Just a bit, y'all. All right.
can become psychotic after 6 months? And what they mean by that is, do you believe a normal person, if put into this situation where there's extreme conditions, can become psychotic after 6+ months?
And we got to think about normal conditions, right? Like, and he's not in normal conditions. Okay. Normal conditions is going to be on a cell block where for most people, where there are bunk beds and there's people and there's tables and you sit around and you play spades all day and you get your meals and you get to talk to people. You can go outside in like a fenced in area that at least has sunlight coming through bars or whatever for an hour a day. But he's not even in that. He's in solitary confinement with what I'm assuming would be the turtle suit, which means completely naked, no sheets, no bed, no nothing. Eating bugs that are crawling across the floor in his feces. Like in they saw a video where prisoners were being mean and he's got to be kept somewhere else, which is going to be already worse than general population. But then on top of that, he's in a turtle suit in solitary and eating bugs and eating feces, and they're having to inject him with Haldol. So it makes it worse than what even normal confinement would be.
To which he responded, absolutely, I've seen it. So again, interesting testimony that in this case backs up one of the defense's theories that Richard Allen's mental state was deteriorating when he made those confessions in prison to killing Abby Williams and Libby German.
Yeah. I think it is important to note too, with this jury, they're smart.
Very smart.
They ask really good questions. They ask a lot of questions. A lot of people have been commenting about how can they do that? I've never heard of a juror being able to ask a witness a question, but it is under the jury rules, under Indiana law, that they can do that. And so when they ask the questions, the witness answers, and then both sides, the defense and the state, have an opportunity to follow up with additional questions of their own.
Yeah. And it's pretty straightforward.
It is. It really is.
And it's been good to hear. I think it shows everyone in the courtroom that they are listening, that they are involved, and they are asking those questions. Moving on, shall we, to our next one. This next one was interesting, and it was perhaps one of the longer ones of the day. This time we're talking about Dr. Eric Warren, working specifically with firearm crime scene reconstruction and what that process looks like, but more specifically what it looks like to this case. And of course, a lot of the conversations around this case have been about this cartridge, right? Some people calling it about this bullet. Talk to us about what you took away from some of the things he shared.
So a lot of what Dr. Warren shared were his experiences with firearm and tool mark identification. And so he's looking at several things. 3 categories that he specifically mentioned were individual marks. And these are marks that are specific to a firearm, whether it be some type of issue within the firearm, if it's been damaged, if it can cause a specific striation mark, which are like scratches on it, or what he calls an impression. The other thing that he's looking at is subclass. And so subclass are marks that can be made on a cartridge or a bullet, a casing, that come from a manufacturer flaw.
Hi, Karen Best. Karen Best says, just a minute. Can you tell me Is this the only place in America that allows the jury to ask the witness questions? That is a great question, and I'm honestly not sure. I think anytime a juror has a question, they can write it down and give it to, I would assume, the judge or the clerk of court, and have the question asked in court. But I'm honestly not sure, and I think that's a great question. I'll try to look it up on my phone while we're listening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your comment.
Law. This is not the first time I've actually heard this type of testimony. I covered a murder in Ohio perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, and a similar testimony was used about a gun. And they talk about how in the milling process, or as these firearms, and it was actually specifically a Sig Sauer as well, when they're made in the factory,
You're welcome.
they cut them off at each end. And so there's a specific tool. It's cutting here, it's cutting here. And so as they go down the line, you're going to see similar, perhaps marks, not exact, but you could see similar.
Which would explain why Richard Allen's gun couldn't be specifically identified, and the neighbor that we were talking about yesterday, his gun couldn't be ruled out. If they're all the same from the factory, then no Sig Sauer can be ruled out. Paranormal says he will be institutionalized if he's ever released. They have broken that man, mind, body, and soul. They really have. They really have. And it's devastating. Karen, I'm going to look that up right now.
The insides of the gun, if you will, the extractor, the slide, some different parts are often made at other facilities. And so it's not a send it down the assembly line, everything is exactly the same. They kind of put all these parts into a box, as Warren described it, and then they pull them out, and an individual physically puts the gun together. And so, but because of some of this milling process, you can have what is called a subclass of characteristics. So it's something that you might find on other firearms. He did say that when firearms are shipped, they kind of just put them all in a big shipment and they send them out. So firearms sent to Northwest Indiana, Northern Indiana, Central Indiana are going to perhaps have similar subclasses compared to firearms that are in Florida, for instance.
That is really interesting information. So per Google, what Google says is the propriety of allowing a juror to directly question a witness is left to the sound discretion of the trial court. So it would basically be, it's up to the court. This one says it is important to ask questions if you do not understand a question. Each juror is obligated to follow the laws as explained by the judge. If you cannot follow the law, you must let the judge know. So what I'm finding is that it's up to the court. Though it's very rare in practice, jurors are not expressly prohibited from asking their own questions of a witness. The propriety of allowing juror to directly question a witness is left to the sound discretion of the trial court. However, given the risk and unpredictability that comes from allowing a layperson to ask questions in court, soliciting hearsay or inviting prejudice, risk of offending the juror by objecting, etc., the better practice is to require the juror to submit written questions to the trial judge. The judge, outside the juror's presence, can hear and rule on any objections, to the proposed question. So that's what I've got on that as of right now. Let me pull this back up. Hi, Pat, and thank you for being here. Let me pull our interview back up. Pat says, I kind of think it's a great idea rather than to wait till deliberations to ask stuff. I do too. I think it's a great idea.
So I thought that was interesting.
Great question,
That was
Trixie.
one of the other types of characteristics that he talked about.
Yeah. And of course, to back us up a little bit, what this whole conversation is
Karen.
surrounding, we know at the crime scene, in between the girls, was what we've been talking about, right? People have been talking about this. The exact words, the quote from court today was this cycled, unfired round collected at the scene. That
Absolutely,
was a quote from
Sarah.
the prosecutor today. And it was interesting to hear this scientist, as he called himself,
Me too, Pat.
explain and be somewhat critical of how the state initially handled its examination of this. And so talk to us a little bit more about, he kind of looked at photos, right? We saw photos that were shared today, and how he explained that that was a hallmark example of some of this. Talk to us about that.
Right. So one of the things that he said can happen is that when you photograph a cartridge underneath a comparison microscope, and so we know that Dr. Melissa Oberg had testified that, and she's the Indiana State Police forensic examiner who did an analysis of the cartridge found at the scene and compared that to Richard Allen's gun that was recovered during a search warrant of his home in October of 2022. She talked about similar striation marks, right? So these were marks on the cartridge that she found, we'll say inconclusive when she chambered it, meaning that it was cycled, not fired. Once she fired that through Allen's weapon, she said that she was able to make sufficient agreement, meaning that she could say that this came from this gun, this cartridge came from this gun. But what we heard from Dr. Warren today was that that's not really a fair assessment. That's apples and oranges, not apples to apples. We've heard this exact statement from the defense multiple times as we've talked about this cartridge. But they pulled up one of the defense exhibits that showed photographs of the striation marks on the cartridge, both from a test cycled in from the fired cartridge and then the cycled cartridge. And they're similar, but you can tell they're not matching up directly because there's just not.
You can't, in my humble opinion, I don't think comparing a spent cartridge, like I've said several times before, to an unspent cartridge is fair in any way. And it should not be used as a representation, especially to show someone's guilt or innocence, because that's all they have. I really hope that this expert is really making sure to state all of the facts that, about the machine. Like they said, the stuff she's going over right now. I really hope the jury understands that, and everything that they're saying about, it could be from the manufacturing, how they cut the bullets and stuff, and the striations didn't match exactly like she's saying. The jury, because that's all they have on him. So I really hope that this is dismissed and that this man can try to find healing after this.
Not enough.
I asked the same
and so we've
thing.
heard that before. The different things can contribute to the pressure of the cartridge and what makes the marks. And one of the things that he said is that when you photograph this cartridge under the light of the microscope, you get divots, and those are highlighted. And so a mere shift one way or another could change that. And so that's one of the reasons I think that he was pretty critical of Melissa Oberg's findings, is that, again, it happened with this microscope. If it had changed a little bit, but what he did say is what he could see on the cartridge were, and he said, hallmark examples of subclass indicative of what I would expect to see in subclass markings on the cartridge.
Yeah. And it was interesting too, you mentioned him being critical of the initial handling from the state police. And I think too, he talked about not documenting. And he said so many of the things that maybe could have been documented just weren't documented. So I'm not sure how to respond, or I'm not sure how to take that because it simply wasn't included or wasn't reported in the first place. And he was asked about that. He said, if you were to have been doing this, would you have documented all of this? And he pretty much said, yeah, I would have. And I wish it would have been there so that he could have had a more thorough look at that initial state report.
But again, just like the doctor who testified earlier today about solitary confinement, he did not examine the cartridge physically. He's taking all of his information based on reports that he has read. And the jurors asked a really good question. They asked him, why didn't he write a report? Why didn't he examine it? And he basically said, I wasn't asked. Right. I was asked to come in and evaluate and determine if sufficient agreement could be made based on Melissa Oberg's reports, and I did not find sufficient agreement. But again, He didn't run the test himself. Interestingly enough, he said, had he run the test, it may have gone either way.
Right.
He may have found sufficient agreement, or it could have stayed the same and he could have said that there wasn't sufficient agreement. So again, it's almost a neutral point, if you will, because he didn't physically examine the evidence himself.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear him say, basically, I came in to do the job that I was asked to do.
Yes.
If I would have been asked to do more, I could have done more, but I came to do my job.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Exactly.
So our fourth witness we heard from today gave us the most, what I would consider to be new information.
Absolutely.
And perhaps some of the most talked about information of the day. Like we told you earlier, this was from Stacy Elridge. This was interesting to talk about the phones in the digital data surrounding this case. There have been a lot of discussions about that.
I was talking about that. I wanted to know, my question, and they might go over it, I hope they do, was if the neighbor that came home right during the time that the red rum supposedly happened, I want to know if there's any communications between him and Abby and Libby, because it doesn't make sense that he came right home, went right up to the bridge and did what he did if it was him, because again, I have to question if the neighbor could be responsible for this. But if there's text communications between them and he knew they were going to be there already, then I think it's possible that he could have done this. So I'm excited to hear the digital evidence.
And today we heard from an expert who, again, has years of experience. She worked with the FBI as a senior forensic examiner, working with some of this digital data. And she was here today to talk about the data that was pulled from state police from Libby German's phone. And of course, that's important because you'll remember that's where we got the video.
Yes.
And the audio from Bridge Guy, of Bridge Guy. And so now we're hearing from this investigator, this examiner, who's saying, yeah, I looked at this data and yeah, I can appreciate some of the data that's here, but I actually found more.
Right.
And she showed us, talk to me about that. She put up this data set on the screen for the entire courtroom to see, and she really walked us through what she found, which was interesting.
Right. So what she says is that Libby's phone showed at 5:44 in the afternoon that something recorded plugging into the headphone jack. And then that same cell phone recorded at 10:32 p.m. that evening that it was unplugged. She can't say specifically what it was, but she said typically these findings would be a headphone jack. But here's the other interesting, she said, and these are her words, a millisecond, right? A millisecond before something was inserted into that headphone jack, Libby's phone rang. She received a call. So that's information that we didn't have before at all.
This is all really interesting. This is during the time period that they were searching for her. And I mean, what's plugged into a headphone jack? Okay, an auxiliary cord. If you're gonna, the cord that you use to plug, like if you want to plug your phone into your car, the old school, some of y'all might be younger and not know what I'm talking about, but it has the headphone jack on each end. And you can plug it into something like that, or headphones. Who plugged headphones in? Why did they plug headphones in? When did they plug headphones in? This is all really interesting. Yes, but the phone never moved from the site, right? We don't know, because it went either on airplane mode or just straight disappeared out of signal service area for, I don't know, I don't remember the time frame, but it was quite a while. And putting headphones in is a good way to silence a ringtone, or, it's also another way. I mean, let me put up a trigger warning real quick. It would also be a way, trigger warning again, for if somebody was trying to hurt you and they didn't want you to hear when they were about to approach you, so you could fight back and you were bound, they could put headphones in your ears so you wouldn't be able to hear and know when they were going to approach you and fight back. But, that's just allegedly speculating and maybe going out a little bit too far in some of my thought process. This is really interesting. And it brings up a whole new aspect, I think.
And there's also been a lot of questions, even a juror question on how does that happen, right? Because we know that Libby's phone was found underneath a shoe, underneath the body of Abby Williams at the crime scene. So how does it get plugged in? That's the big question.
Yeah, that's the first time we had heard of what sounds like another person with or manipulating that phone. And it was all
Pat says, or putting headphones on while Abby was attacked. That's a great theory too. But yeah, the fact that it happened a millisecond after the phone rang is questionable. Did they, I mean, because that would make me think that they didn't want the person to hear that the phone was ringing. But why? What does that accomplish? Would be my question. And who put it in? Unless, another theory could be is if the girls thought that they were going, like maybe somebody picked them up, got them to get into a vehicle, because that theory's been brought up that maybe they got into a vehicle and actually left the area and were brought back later. So maybe they thought that they were going to go meet somebody and they put the headphones in. Maybe one of the girls put the headphones in to silence the phone from ringing. But then again, I mean, they would just silence the phone. Like if they were in a car and they were like, oh, we're going to go meet him. Let's go. We'll be back. Da, 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 da. I don't know. Oh, hold on, Trixie. I'm going to play this while Trixie comes up.
Was also interesting to hear, and we had this witness show us, right? They brought one of the old iPhone 6S's. They had the old headphone jack, and she showed us what that process would have looked like. And I think it was also interesting when the defense pointed out, if someone's calling your cell phone and maybe your sound is on, right? You can audibly hear it ringing.
Right.
When you plug in that headphone jack or whatever was plugged in, that cuts the audio.
It does.
Jenny says it's like the person didn't try to destroy their phone either, which is interesting. Hey, Trixie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to make a comment on that because they're saying how, okay, like right when Libby's phone rang, then headphones were, what it showed was like something like headphones entered the jack of it and all that. Okay. And then you got people who were saying, oh, well, it could have been possible moisture, which caused the phone, to do that.
Yeah.
And then,
I don't think so.
I don't either, because of the fact that if it was moisture that got into the phone, phones do have a detector inside that can detect if moisture got into the phone.
Right.
2, if it was under the body, there would be no way for that moisture to escape. It actually might even build up more moisture if there,
Yeah.
instead of being in the open air where it would possibly get, wind, breeze, whatever. Yeah. So I really think, yes, that it sounds more like somebody purposely plugged something in at that, time, which could have been a coincidental time.
Yeah.
I mean, there've been times I went to go pick up my phone to do something and immediately, somebody called me. That's
Right.
happened. But yeah, I'm thinking it was purposely done. Now, whether or not it was to prevent one from hearing the other being red rummed or what, we don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be a good theory. If it was moisture, because you have digital forensics going over the phone, I think they would have said it was moisture, because like I said, like you said, it pops up because I plugged my phone into charge and it will say that the jack is wet and to take it out. So, I mean, it tells you on the phone if it's moisture usually.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, you got to figure, because was it an iPhone, right?
Yes. I don't have iPhone, but
Okay, I don't either, but I know, like, phones in general, like anytime like I go to do an upgrade, or like if I've changed my service and I go to get another phone, they want your old phone as like a, to go, it helps with the payment for it.
Right,
Um,
right.
they always check to make sure to see if there was any water damage. So there is something in all these phones, especially iPhones. I mean,
Yeah,
basically Apple's kind of like more advanced and more secure, you know?
right. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, I really don't think it was moisture. Eek asked, "Do we know if the girl had headphones with them? If the girls had headphones with them?" And that's a great question. Pat said, "If it goes on airplane mode, does that stop your phone from recording steps, or I guess just turn the GPS off?" I don't know, but we know, like, they've told us when the phone didn't pick up any signal. So what we should do, I don't know if I can do it today, is correlate the time that there was no signal on the phone to the time that this headphone jack got picked up being inserted or whatever it was, and then we would know that. Where did you hear, Trixie, that it was water or could have been water?
Oh, it was one of the really bigger good channels.
Yeah, okay.
I can't think of who it was now.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I was just wondering if it was, yeah, that was kind of, you
And
answered
by
my
good
question.
channels, I mean like non-drama
Oh,
channels.
no, yeah, I
That's what I
know.
meant.
Yeah, there's a lot of channels out there that are, like, really bigger. I would say the same thing, one of the good channels, because our channel's small, not that we're not good. I know
Well,
what you
no,
mean.
no, your channel's great. What I
Oh, well,
meant
thank
by good was it was a total, this was the non-drama parts of true crime channels,
yeah,
you
okay.
know, that I heard it on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested to see what Lawyer Lee and, Andrea Burkhart and Grizzly would have to say about that. Hmm.
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. I wasn't Grizzly. I mean, maybe Michelle Walks.
Okay, I haven't seen her.
Um, she's good. She tries to go by facts, you know.
Yeah. Anders says, Eek, I don't know, but apparently they could see the phone on the phone that headphones were plugged in. Eek says, which is a great point. I'm just wondering if one of the girls was trying to be quiet or someone else wanted it to be quiet. Because again, like, if you realize you're in a situation that is dangerous and you don't want them to know that you have a phone, could you plug your headphone jacks in then to try to keep the phone from ringing or somebody hearing it ring? That's a good point.
Yeah, I just turned my volume off.
Yeah, that would be what I would think too. But if you're trying to hide the phone, would it be easier? But I mean, you'd have to dig for the headphones. So
Possible.
yeah, this is really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna play the video. Thank you, Trixie, for letting me know that. And you're good to stay up here if you want to, or you can go if you want to. Either way is good with me.
Okay, I'll mute.
Okay.
So if Libby's phone would have been ringing for the room to hear, when you plug that in, it would have stopped.
Right.
And so
Right.
it was interesting to see her actually show us that. And this examiner was talking about how when she's pulling some of this data, in her words, she said she's getting under the hood, right? And she explained several levels of data that she's able to pull, from basic surface level stuff all the way down to, it was, in her words, stuff the user can't touch and can't control. Something that Libby or whoever was using this phone would have no control over. She's able.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, I love our channel, and I love all of our speculating family, and we are doing great. Oh, Trixie, I can drop the link if you want to come back up. Pat says, do Androids have a ringer switch? I had one, but I forget if it was an Android. So on my Android, when somebody calls, like even when I'm live right now, I can hit the volume down button on the side and it'll mute the ringer. Or if I hit I could scroll across the no, like hang up, and it'll stop it from ringing too. But it's not like I have a switch that mutes it unless I turned my volume all the way down or turned my ringer all the way down, then it would be on mute.
Yeah, mine I have a thing I hit that I can silence the sounds, but my phone could still ring and I'd hear it, or I can totally turn that off.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like a little bell and you can turn it to where it doesn't do anything. Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Able to pull. She claims state police in that initial data poll did just the bare minimum. And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't get that full report and full gather of the data until October of that year.
Right. And if I heard testimony correctly today, this information perhaps that she discovered was on that full data poll.
Right.
So First Sergeant Chris Cecil with the Indiana State Police wasn't aware of what the breakdown of the numbers and the information meant at the time. And he later testified to that today, that he just wasn't aware of what that was.
And outside of this headphone jack conversation too, something else that this witness brought up that was interesting was she was talking about this full extraction, like we mentioned, in October of 2017. And she said, I went back and I looked, and one of the key cases of what she called was missing evidence that concerned her was what she called the current power log.
Right.
And that's basically the inner workings of your phone that document every time it goes on and off. And the more it goes on and off, the more it loses data and the more information that's dropped. And she said, that could become an issue if you're dropping files, if your phone gets older, just as it generates too. And that was concern for her.
It was, because we know that the phone was off when it was found at the scene. It was powered on so that the Indiana State Police could try to pull some immediate data, which was the basic pull, photos, videos, messages, that type of thing. It then powered off again, powered back on, and there were at least 2 different times that they attempted to extract data from the phone. And what she says, like you said, is that every time those files fall off, and not only that, but the older the phone gets. So between February 17th and October of that same year, older data is going to start to fall off.
Yep. So she goes through, we hear a little bit more too.
I wonder what was lost. And I'm questioning, are they saying they didn't do the extraction until October? And if so, why are you waiting so long? I'd have to see when the Bridge Guy video was originally put out.
I know they said they didn't want to do any extractions right away because of the fact that every time you go into the phone, it changes things.
Yeah, okay, taking that into account though, why I still don't understand why you wouldn't go ahead and get all the data you could get off of it immediately.
Yeah, but we're talking about Delphi here.
Yeah, no doubt.
About the health data app on Libby German's phone. That's to have captured movement on her phone, right? And she went into more details about, if the phone were in a car, would the health app record? Or if the phone was off, would the health app be recording movements? To both, she answered no. But again, the phone was essentially
911, what's your emergency?
Please.
Oh, Lord Jesus. Sorry. That was a child. I can't. Lord have mercy. Okay. Woo. Anders said that I heard the moist theory. The moist. Moist. I don't know who said it, but they were repeating what a cell phone expert said. That's interesting. Because again, I would just like we were talking about, it usually says moisture entered the phone. And, going back to what Trixie said, if the body is laying on top of it, it would keep it in a confined area where I would think moisture would build up even more. Think about your phone in a box or something out in the sun. There's going to be water condensation that kind of happens. I don't know if that was a good reference, because obviously under a body it's not going to be exposed to sunlight. But I think you understand what I'm saying. There's going to be condensation is the main point. Oh, hold on, y'all. Sorry. Let me back it up.
Basically for the rest of the phone.
There you go.
But again, the phone was essentially off the record, was essentially tracking no movement from around 2:30 that afternoon on February 13th, basically for the rest of the phone's life. And that was something that they talked a little bit more about. The prosecution asked a few more questions about that too. But I thought this part was interesting. When the defense asked her, she said, okay, so if the phone was stationary, if it was at the crime scene this whole time, why would it disconnect from cell towers in the area for hours, for most of the night, and then suddenly reconnect again at 4:33 a.m. the next morning? And this witness said, well, I didn't find any evidence in the digital data that shows what may have gone wrong. So she says, I believe something external happened.
Right.
Either the phone was moved or service was blocked. At that point, the prosecution kind of pushed back and said, okay, but have you been to the scene? Do you know the cell service here in Carroll County? Do you know the cell service of that specific day and time? Basically alluding to the fact that, is it more logical that maybe that phone just lost service for all that time?
Right. And Prosecutor McClellan said, you know, calls can go in and out. You could be sitting right here with your phone and you can go in and out of service. And she agreed that that's possible. She's seen it happen. And so he was alluding to the fact that Libby's phone could have gone out of service just came back on at 4:33 in the morning.
So my question would be then, I would want to get somebody with the same type of phone that she had to go to the exact spot that it happened and see if cell phone service went in and out, and if they still received phone calls but were technically out of service range. But again, I mean, it'd be hard to recreate that now because we don't know if more towers have been put up in the area and whatnot. But I think that would have been a good thing to find out at the time. Just, you know, me personally.
Exactly. You would have thought, well, I'm sure if they would have allowed the FBI to come in to handle things, we would have had better information, better, you know, all around. I mean, I just cannot get over how incompetent the law enforcement is there. I can't get over that.
Yep. It's insane. In my opinion, allegedly speculating.
So we heard she was on the stand a couple hours.
Yes.
A couple hours this afternoon. That was the second witness of the day we had seen on the stand for several hours. And again, I stepped out right before this point so we could make sure we were on 13 News this afternoon, but you stayed for jury questions.
Yes.
And I think, again, going back to what we talked about earlier about the detailed questions that are coming from some of those jurors.
Yeah, so the jurors asked 11 questions of her. That's a lot. I don't think it's their most. I think we had 13 another time, but 11 questions is a lot. And just a quick rundown, they asked her if she wrote her own report on her findings. Again, she did not extract the data from Libby's phone personally. She reviewed reports. And so she said, because of limited time, she did not. And that's the second time we heard her today talk about the limit of time.
No, Anders, you didn't misspell moist. With a lot of YouTubers, and I don't know, I don't even know where I saw it, but there's this, there's a YouTube creator that's like a really funny guy, with black hair, and he's called Moist something. But when people say the word moist, it's like a joke because, I think it relates to, I don't know, I'm not going to say that, but it's just, it's like a backdoor joke kind of thing. I don't know. It's like kind of gross to think about the word moist. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a joke, just the word moist, not anything you did. That's a, here in the US type of thing.
We don't know why that time was limited. We know that she was paid roughly $300 an hour for her services as an expert witness by the defense. That is not unusual that either side would pay for an expert witness. We don't know if that's why or if it was for other reasons, but she did mention that time was an issue. Another juror asked if the information that was pulled, this Knowledge Seed database, could have been synced to Libby's iPad. We know that she had an iPad that she used. And she said, I don't believe there was any syncing between the devices. This question actually was really interesting. One of the jurors asked if water or moisture could affect movement of the phone. We know that the girls were taken across the creek. A forensic pathologist had testified, and multiple Indiana State Police CSIs testified that the clothes that Abby was wearing were wet. There was a water line, and she said she didn't know. But the follow-up question, remember, attorneys can ask follow-up questions. Nick McClellan then asked her, would water affect the headphone port? Now, she said it wouldn't at that time, but we're going to learn in a little bit from First Sergeant Cecil some possible contradictory information that he found compared to that. They asked if someone could have put something into the port to scramble the signal so that the phone wouldn't come up with any information.
That's a great question. The whole getting moist or damp thing, like we talked about, me and Trixie and you guys, I don't think that's it. But could somebody have scrambled the signal? Yeah, sure.
And then they asked an interesting question, which was not related to her testimony at all. And that was, could you have analyzed Richard Allen's phone to see where he was during those hours? And she said yes. And I found that
great question.
That's something that, we think, why didn't that happen? Well, remember, in evidence that was collected during the search warrant, there were about 12 phones and 2 beepers from Richard Allen's home. But the phone he was using in 2017 was never recovered. And so police have not analyzed that phone. So it begs the question, if they could analyze the phone, what would they find out? And would that information contribute to Richard Allen's innocence or to his guilt?
So this was towards the very end of the day. This was all just after 3:30, around 4 o'clock. Quickly, though, after we heard from the jurors' questions, we did, like you mentioned, we heard from 2 gentlemen during the rebuttal from the prosecution. And then the defense actually called up these 2 gentlemen, right? Talk to us quickly about what we learned there.
So the defense called Indiana State Police First Sergeant Chris Cecil, and also they called up, and I want to get his title right, Lieutenant Brian Bunner. Both gentlemen analyzed the phone. Lieutenant Bunner analyzed it very early in the investigation. First Sergeant Cecil did the further extractions using Cellbrite and other information, and actually pulled new information as of August of this year. And so what Jennifer Auger for the defense asked him was, did he know about this audio output start? She said, do you know what that is? And he said, no. And she said, can you, in your expertise, say why or how it happened? And he said, no. Well, then Prosecutor McClellan comes up and asks him on cross-examination, did you research this information?
That's it. That's his name, Penguin O. That's that. Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about.
And Chris Cecil said, actually, yes. After hearing that juror's question and Nick McClellan, following up, he did a Google search. And in that Google search, he found websites that were talked about troubleshooting your audio output port. And in there, he said that it said water damage or dirt could cause the phone to register a headphone being plugged in when it is not. Why does that matter? Because the phone was found, McClellan followed up with, under a shoe, under the body of Abby Williams in the dirt.
Yeah. And near the water.
Right. Yes. So
interesting. Okay. So today, kind of like we said at the beginning, today was very technical.
Yes.
I still don't think it's possible. I really don't.
Felt like on a couple different fronts, a lot of key parts and conversations of this case felt very technical today. We're expecting more tomorrow. Like we mentioned, today is day 16. Tomorrow will mark day 17. I'm curious, as someone who's followed this from the beginning, do you have any expectations for tomorrow? Or perhaps more importantly, we're nearing the end of this, right? What about the timeline moving forward? Do you have any predictions?
So this is kind of my prediction of how it will go. I feel that the defense will probably wrap up sometime before lunch tomorrow or right after lunch. We know then that the state will have an opportunity to offer some rebuttal witnesses. I could really see us wrapping up possibly as early as the end of the day tomorrow, coming in with closing statements on Thursday, Friday morning at the latest, and the jury going to deliberate before the weekend. So it could be that we have a verdict before the weekend comes. This would end the trial almost a week earlier than they had anticipated. And Judge Gall did say during jury selection that both parties has indicated we could end early. I think something to note is that the jurors actually have had an opportunity to discuss the case throughout. They've not had to wait until deliberations to discuss it. The rule is all 15 have to be together. And as long as all 15 are together, they can discuss. If one person is missing, they cannot. So we have to ask, are they starting to kind of formulate in their minds what they're thinking, what direction they're heading in terms of a verdict?
Yeah, and like you said, the original.
So I'll be interested to see how long it takes them to deliberate. I mean, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of question of guilt or innocence, in my opinion. So I still think it'll take a while. But the fact that they're able to talk to each other is interesting to me. Zio says that the defense rested before lunch. So I want to see. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try my best to be live during jury deliberations, or at least come live when we find out that there's a verdict, and do that live. So if you guys hear that there is a verdict, please come check me out, because I want to do it live with you guys, and we can all react together. We'll watch the end of this, and then we're going to see what Vinnie Politan has to say about all of the things going on in the trial. Oh, sorry, Trixie.
The original timeline of this case was through.
You're okay. I was just going to say, yeah, I think, honestly, in my opinion, allegedly speculating, I think this jury is good. They do ask a lot of good questions. They want to have knowledge so that they can base their decisions off of, what is real, things that weren't brought up. So that's why they're asking these questions. Honestly, I think this jury is going to do the right thing. I really, I don't know. Something in me tells me they're going to do the right thing. It may take them a while, but I think they're going to come back with not guilty.
I hope so, because I really don't see him being guilty. There's just not enough there.
No. I'm sorry. Some guy who works at CVS, just a family man, goes out. I mean, because in the beginning, I saw videos of him on his Facebook. I looked into it, out partying with his wife at a bar, all that. He was just a family guy. He's not going to be able to get that whole scene where not one speck of his DNA is there. Not going to happen.
No, it's not possible. I don't think it's possible for anybody to do that. I mean, you'd have to be in a full hazmat suit, and nobody saw that in the middle of the day. I don't think so.
That's why I truly think one of the girls had contact with someone, and basically, I think this was a planned thing with multiple people. I mean, I cannot see this just being a one-person thing.
I don't either. I think they were going there to meet who they thought was Anthony Schatz on the internet that day, and that happened, unfortunately.
Yep.
I don't think Richard Allen has a damn thing to do with it. Oh, okay. So sorry, I was coming back in my room. I'm gonna play. We're gonna listen to the end of this, and we'll see what Vinnie Politan has to say.
Through next Friday, through November 15th. So if things were to wrap up this week, like you said, it'd put us about a week ahead.
Yes.
We have no indication, no timeline on jury deliberation, what that could look like. But to your point, maybe they're having some of these conversations already. So we'll see. We'll see what tomorrow brings, what the days ahead bring. Thank you, Amy, for being with us.
Having me.
It's a lot to break down. It's good to have multiple perspectives because, again, like we've mentioned on here, no cameras allowed in the courtroom. So it's just Amy and I and all of our notes, right? So we will continue, of course, to follow this both here at WTHR and with our friends at the Carroll County Comet. We anticipate much more developments in the days to come, and we'll have you covered. So we'll send.
Okay. So Pat brought up a great point. She said, could somebody have been waiting down the hill? And that's a great question. Zayo said, Joy said he could be a serial person, and that's true. I mean, I don't think he is, but what I do want to say is true, that they do hide in plain sight, and people that you think are family men definitely could be. Oh, I was like, I thought Seth Rogers was on Pascal right now, but that's we're going through something. Liddy Seaman says, thank you for being here, Liddy, today. Says the changing of clothes feels very cult-like. Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure. Didn't pause it. Hold on a minute. Do y'all know I was watching last night ASMR? Like it was, it was geishas, like doing their makeup and stuff and getting ready, and getting dressed as geishas. I was watching that until I fell asleep last night. I thought it was really interesting. I don't know. I guess I'm weird. I watched kids dancing and doing ballet. They have like ballroom dances, and these kids are like amazing at this. Okay. So let's see. We got testimony in the Delphi's murder trial. Delphi murders Richard Allen, Mailbox Man, and Brad Weber. Maybe we can go over who is Richard Allen. I think that's a good one to go over first, and then I'll try to get another one in today too. Maybe. There we go. So this is going to be Vinnie Politan Investigates, and it says Delphi Murders, who is Richard Allen? I think that's a great one to play. It's music. I think that's a good one to play today, so we get a better idea of who this man is that's on trial, and like hopefully they'll play some of the videos like Trixie was just talking about and all of that.
Is the Delphi murders. Two young girls out for an innocent hike end up dead in a small Indiana town. The suspect has been arrested, but do investigators have the right man? Here's
if that's too low for y'all, let me know. It was just really loud, so I thought it might be too loud for y'all.
the story. It was an unseasonably warm February day in 2017 in the small rural town of Delphi, Indiana. It's not a place where you worry when your teenage kids decide to go on an adventure. So when Abby Williams and her best friend Libby German decided to go on a hike near the Monon High Bridge in the middle of the day, no one thought it was dangerous. But when Libby and
I like Vinny too. Have y'all seen he's got like a YouTube channel where he goes on and he'll talk to you and stuff? I think that's pretty cool.
Abby did not show up for their ride home, their families began to worry and they began to search. Then the next day, the worst news possible. The bodies of these two girls were found, both victims of murder, their throats slashed, one girl naked and the other wearing her friend's clothes. As the investigation progressed over 5 years, there were sketches of a suspect, but it looked like two different people. There was also a grainy video of the killer. Then finally, an arrest of the accused murderer, Richard Allen. Allen says he didn't do it, and he also alleges that it was a group of Odinists who were actually responsible for this ritualistic killing. But prosecutors believe they have the evidence to convict Allen, including 61 alleged confessions. Will Abby and Libby get justice? 61 confessions. Alleged confessions, big part of the evidence in the case against Richard Allen. Confessions are direct evidence. Direct evidence.
I was muted. I'm sorry. I said I hope that they do get justice, and I hope this is not going to be like the West Memphis 3, what we were just seeing, where those boys never got justice, and they're trying now, but not having a lot of luck.
Of the crime.
Oh, I should have waited.
Someone say holiday cards? At This Print, we print the perfect cards for the perfect price.
Like Abella said, it's not even Thanksgiving yet. Slow your roll. Okay, Trixie.
So let's talk about one confession. And this may be the most important alleged confession made by Richard Allen. It's to Dr. Monica Walla, who is a prison psychologist. So she gets up on the stand and describes this alleged confession by Richard Allen. And it's detailed. Let's take a look. Richard Allen's alleged detailed confession about the day of the murders. Allen went to his parents' house, but did not join them for lunch. He bought a 6-pack of beer. He went to the trails. He saw the girls on the trails and followed them across the bridge. The girls, Abby and Libby. He mentioned doing something with his gun and he thought, quote, the bullet fell out. He told the girls down the hill and crossed the creek.
Okay, I want to pause right there because we heard through testimony that in the video, the full-length video, that the man that was walking across the bridge guy right here in blue, he didn't say down the hill. His lips are not moving when down the hill is said. It's somebody else. So again, I mean, somebody had to be down the hill, actually down the hill. This person came up from one side with the pew-pew and showed it to them, and then somebody else from behind them already down the hill, allegedly speculating, said down the hill, because you can't say down the hill without your lips moving unless you're a ventriloquist, and I don't think that was the case here at all.
Wanted to sexually assault them, but didn't because he saw a van. He cut their necks, covered their bodies in branches, stayed off the trails to exit to avoid being seen. Details. This isn't just, oh, I did it. These are specific details. So it raises a question because you want to know, is this a false confession or a true confession? And the devil may be in the details here. And that brings me to my first question. How did Richard Allen know all these details? Are they details that only the killer would know?
Sarah says that video and alleged audio of Bridge Guy was so enhanced too many times. It made it completely altered and wasn't even accurately lined up. Okay, so then maybe Bridge Guy did say it. I'm not sure. Thank you for pointing that out for me, Anders. I pray. I'm praying right now that they don't. I don't know if they're going to mention it, but they didn't show it, and I don't want to see it.
If so, that's a pretty good test of a confession being trustworthy. If there's information in the confession that no one else knows about, other than the killer and maybe investigators. Joining us to discuss this, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald and criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Mata, both of them in Indiana, both of them inside the courtroom covering all of this. Great to see you both. Barbara, these...
Trixie, yes, for yesterday for the jury, they put a TV up that was only facing the jury, and they showed the jury video of Richard Allen in jail. They showed the video of him eating his...
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I'm thinking something with the crime scene.
Oh, no, yeah, it was that. And I'm like, I don't want to see it.
I'm sorry. They drove Richard Allen to go crazy. They really did.
They did. And it's not
Yeah,
fair.
no. And I'm sorry, but they didn't have a lot of recordings of his quote unquote confessions, did they? Because they
No.
said, right. So you got these quote unquote experts saying that he said this to me, he said that to me. How do we know?
Right. And keeping in mind that the fact that they can't bring up in trial that this one guard had the patch and then got the Odinist symbol tattooed under his eye, I'm questioning all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with this whole thing about the van, he said he was getting ready to SA the girls, but he got this van and he got scared. How do we know he said that?
Right. And even if he Pat asked, but how do you know about the ban? They talked about that one psychologist that was questioning him was telling him, you know, people are out there, they support you, they don't think you did this, and you have to question, did she say something about the white van? Because it was known that the neighbor drove a white van by that point, by the time she's talking to him. So
Right. So I think during these supposed confessions that were mysteriously just vanished in the air, do I believe they were recording him? Yes. Do I believe they were giving him leading questions and
Yep.
bringing things up? Yep. And I think that's why they all disappeared.
Yep. I do too. Yep. Yep. I hope that the jury sees through all this bullshit.
Hey, I'm going to step down
These
because
are
I got to
details.
get ready to get
Okay, you've been
one of my littles from school.
Oh, okay. Well, be safe going and getting them. I hope they had a good day at school.
Yep. I'll be listening.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming up. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
covering this story a long time. What are your thoughts about the details that were revealed in this alleged confession heard by this psychologist?
Well, the one detail that was included in that confession that the state argues is something that only the killer would know is this information about this van that Richard Allen said in this confession, this one confession, that he saw a van and that's what spooked him. He decided to abandon his plan to sexually assault these girls and instead marched them across the creek where he killed them, covered them with branches, and then fled the area. For a while, we have been hearing, I've heard from law enforcement sources, it's been out on social media that Brad Weber, who lived at the south end of the bridge, was coming home from work. I had always heard it as 3:30 p.m. and that he was driving on his private drive. And that was a law enforcement theory, is that Brad Weber returning home from work spooked whoever was out there doing whatever it was they were doing to the girls at that time. Now we're hearing that that happened at 2:30. The witness who testified today said that he knows that Brad Weber clocked out of work in Lafayette, which is about 25 or 30 minutes away, at 2:02 p.m. And according to Waze and Google Maps, he should have been getting home at 2:27 to 2:30. And that's their theory, is that that is information only the killer would know, and that that's what spooked Richard Allen into committing the murders.
And just for clarification purposes, this road, it's a private road, so it's almost like an extension of your driveway if you have this massive property?
Exactly. Yes.
So there's no general traffic going there, only some.
Oh no, Trixie, you're fine. It does that when you come up. I don't. It could be my computer because it's done it several times when people come up. But you're fine, honey. You're good.
One who would live there would be driving down that road, and you wouldn't necessarily expect someone to be driving there.
Right.
Right. Now, at the time, people, the road was not blocked off, so people could get onto that road.
Okay.
Ever since the crime happened, it is something they've put up no trespassing signs and even a chain across the driveway at times to keep people out.
That's interesting. Sarah says if you're dealing with a high profile case as a mental health professional, you can't be fangirling on YouTube creators live streams. It seems unethical. It is. She was going all over these YouTube streets talking about things. You can't, I mean, I understand if, like, I try to put myself in that situation, and if I saw this man that was so hopeless, it would be hard for me not to tell him that, don't give up hope just yet, because there's a lot of people out here who think you're innocent, who really support you, but at the same time, at what cost? You could jeopardize the whole entire case by doing that. And also, you shouldn't be looking into the case. I mean, I understand it's interesting and all that, but you've got to put yourself into the position of a juror in that situation, just in my opinion, because you want to be 100% sure that you're not asking him specific questions that could lead him to doing things that could have been done, like asking him about the white van. Did you see a white van? Is that why you stopped essaying them or attempting to essay them? You're messing up the whole integrity of everything. And then you have a confession where he says things that only the red rummer would have known, but we don't know that she didn't give him these contextual clues. And it throws out everything. I mean, what if he really did know stuff that only the red rumor know? Well, now we'll never know, because the integrity of the confessions was, number one, not recorded, and number two, completely violated, in my opinion.
All right, Bob, I want to put this up. This is Brian Harshman, Indiana State Police, testifying. Prior to reading Richard Allen's alleged confession in Dr. Walla's report, Harshman had never heard anything about a van. The only person that would have seen a van there would have been Libby, Abby, and the person that killed them. Harshman looked up the owners of the property and found that Brad Weber owned a 2000 Ford Ecoline van. According to Apple Health data, Libby's phone stopped moving at 2:32 and 39 seconds p.m. Interviewed Brad Webster and found his van would have been on the road between 2:27 and 2:30 on February 13th, 2017. That seems to line up with a timeline. What are your thoughts about this van, this fact, and the trustworthiness of this confession?
Do your paintings look cartoony and plasticky, but you don't know what to do about it? You just want to level up your skills.
I'm curious to see what this person's going to say about this stuff.
Well, that's a lot of questions, and it's interesting. And I'm going to have you hearken back to opening statements. And the defense said that I want you to be aware that in the middle of this trial, that the state is going to have to change their theory. And that is exactly what they did today. They have changed their theory. They've changed their timeline. They now have the time of death that they're approximating is at 2:32 p.m. Because what they did is they lined it up with this whole concept that, look, Abby's or Libby's phone stopped moving at 2:32. We know that from her Apple Health data, and it never moved again. And now we have this van that drives onto the private drive that now we have a statement from who we think is the killer that says that he sees a van, and it's at that point that he kills the girls. They're now locked into it. So they've changed it. So Sarah Carbaugh, for instance,
I get that, but this, I mean, who else would know about the van? Who else would?
Great question. USA Libertarian, it's good to see you today. Thank you for being here. Says the cops want us to believe they never even asked Brad Weber what kind of vehicle he drives. Right. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't. And they saw what kind of vehicle he drives. I think they're saying for Richard Allen to have known about the van, that he had to have been there. And they're saying that that's why the SA stopped, because Brad Weber's van drove up. But again, like we were just saying, I think the psychologists put those key pieces of evidence in his mind and in his confessions, basically putting them in his mind, and then he goes back to his cell where there's nothing. All he can do is sit there and think all day about this case and everything going on and everything said, and he's entering a state of psychosis. So yeah, lots of really questionable things.
But no, about the white van.
Discernment is...
Well, I mean, if you follow this case on social media, and everybody in that town, everyone was talking about vans. Like everybody was talking about vans. Everybody knew that Brad Weber was a suspect early on. I mean, Brad Weber had a Sig Sauer. Now the defense is being shut down from bringing that in because of the motion in limine. But everybody that follows this case and has followed this case the whole time knows that Brad Weber was one of the initial suspects, and they took his Sig Sauer and they tested it, and it couldn't be excluded.
Is Harshman the from the Indiana State Police, who said he never heard of this before? Is he just oblivious to facts that everyone else knows about? I mean, is that kind of where you are on this?
I mean, where I'm at is we're 7 years in. Oh, sorry, Barb, go.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say that he didn't start investigating it until Richard Allen was in custody. He was not one of the original investigators on the case, and he was tasked with listening to his prison phone calls and monitoring his prison communications. And that after he heard that detail, then he went back and looked at the file and started going through reports and ultimately ended up talking to Brad Weber. But also, you know, Richard Allen had his discovery. He had received hundreds of pages from his defense team prior to these confessions happening. And so there are other ways that he could have had this information other than being the killer.
All right. Well, I would say the onus now is on the defense to demonstrate that. Let me ask you one.
Yay, Basil just came out from under the table and is running around. He had me a little worried. USA Libertarian says, hi, isn't that even worse that LE never checked the alibi of the guy who was at the actual crime scene at the exact time of the red rums? Yes, I couldn't agree 100%. They put a target on Richard Allen's back, and it was him from get. It didn't matter if somebody had walked in there with Libby's clothes and said, here's the clothes, I did it. I mean, I don't think that would have even mattered at that point. They knew Richard Allen did it. They put a target on him, and that was their guy. And it you know, not to the point of not even, like you said, not even checking the alibi of the guy who was at the actual crime scene at the exact time of the red rooms. Like, hello. Talk about corrupt.
One more quick question, Bob. A lot of people might be saying and be questioning why a psychologist's conversations with someone would be coming in this case. We saw it in the Menendez trial years ago. Why, in this case, is a psychologist testifying about conversations that are usually privileged?
Allen said that he was at the trail that day, that he walked, and then I think he went home. I'm not sure where he went after the time of the trail. Somebody might have said it in the comment section, but he went to the police station and voluntarily said, hey, I was there that day and I was walking, but I didn't see anything. But again, and I go with, like, okay, if I actually did this, I'm not going to walk into the police station and say I was there, and the police are saying, oh, well, if you really did it, you could do that to try to make us think that you wouldn't do that. So basically it's just a bunch of nonsense, in my opinion. Trixie says he murked them. I like murked. Maybe we'll start saying murked. He murked them and set the scene, and also was careful enough to leave no DNA, all while scared of being caught. Nope. I agree. Sarah says that bullet could have even been from Brad Weber's gun from a different time. I heard the bullet was jammed partially into the ground. That could have happened at any time. Right. And that's my issue with that being in the ground. It was at a 45-degree angle, like somebody was shooting or practicing shooting, like at a different time, not at that time. And I mean, again, the children were knifed. They used a knife. It does defy logic. It really does.
Yeah, in this particular situation, she had testified earlier back in July, late July, the first time that they had hearings regarding these issues. And her explanation was that there's a carve out for her, that if somebody that she's treating who is an inmate gives a inculpatory statement, that she's allowed to make those disclosures. That was her explanation for it. Whether or not that violates a Hippocratic oath up and down is an entirely different thing. But I mean, they've been allowing them in. I know initially that they had tried. That was part and parcel of one of the arguments. The defense was saying that, look, she's a state agent, that what she was doing was the equivalent to her questioning him.
Right.
You know, and then so it was very interesting when she testified with respect to the cross-examination, because it came out that she had been researching this case, that she had been following this case very heavily. She had followed many podcasts that were covering it.
Yep.
She was on Reddit, so she was deep into this case. She accessed.
And we got to think that she didn't give him any contextual clues with all of the ways that she was on Reddit and YouTube podcasts and all of the things. I question if she took the case just so she could go to these places and say, hey, I'm the person talking to him every day. You want to know what he's saying? I have to question that. Anders says windbreaker from Walmart and a goatee. It's classic. I'm not from the Midwest. Out here where I'm at, there's a lot of like Carhartt overalls and things like that. But I mean, it looks like what a normal person would be wearing at even any given time of day. Thank you. Especially in February, walking on a trail, in my opinion.
Everything in this case is just a little different. Everything is different, Bob. We're out of time for now. But just to hold that thought, because I don't want to miss the next subject. Because coming up next, who is Richard Allen?
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard! You're going to prison for the rest of your life! Shame on you, Richard Allen!
And again, guilty, before he even stands trial in the perception of the public. I don't think we should say that anybody is guilty of anything until we see all the evidence, because just like with this, it's laid out like where we were all like, oh yeah, it's definitely him. And now we're hearing all of these other things that tell us that, hey, maybe it really isn't. I don't know what they're talking about right now. Celebrity trials. Okay.
Richard Allen has been married to Kathy for 30 years. They have one daughter.
Allen was raised in Mexico, Indiana, about 40 miles from Delphi.
Mexico is a very small town, smaller than Delphi, with a population of about 1,200 people.
That's where Ricky Allen lived, over there in that yellow house, early on. I think when he first got married, they moved in there, if I remember right. Very, very nice, very respectable young man. I mean, always has been. Yeah, my name is David Yoder, and I knew Ricky his entire life. He is a very loyal dog. He's a quiet kind of, he's very polite, always has been respectful to me. He'll go out of his way and say hi, just to say hello to me. Very friendly, sociable. I really can't speak highly enough about the man. I just can't believe that he did this. I don't believe it for a minute.
Now, to be fair and play devil's advocate, think in your mind about Ted Bundy. He was going to school to be a lawyer, and we know for a fact that he did those things. But there was questions, even with his girlfriend at the time. She saw some weird things, and she thought that he could be the one, and she was actually the one who called and turned him in and felt guilty about that. I just want to say that, people can be doing things that we don't know about and seem like actual normal members of the public. But I mean, again, in this case, my personal opinion is that this man is completely innocent.
People who have talked to who shopped at the CVS and dealt with Richard Allen described him as friendly. In fact, after the murders, Libby's aunt went in there to have some pictures printed for Libby's memorial. She said Richard Allen helped her, and at the time, she thought he was helpful and kind.
Interesting look at the man who's accused of this horrific murder. I mean, this is as bad as it gets, right? You randomly attack two innocent girls. You want to sexually assault them. Then you slit their throats in a small town in Indiana. Doesn't get much worse than that. Take a look. We have some here.
Right, and you mean to tell me that a person that could do that could attack two innocent children and slit their throats? There was no signs of anything. I mean, it could happen, yes, but I don't think it did in this case. I think that somebody showed some signs of some things, and that's the person they should have looked into. There's no way you just can walk around. I mean, there is, but it's not very common that you can walk around and be a normal person while on the side having thoughts and feelings of wanting to kidnap or, approach two children, young teenage girls, and end up slitting their throat. I mean, I just don't see it.
Here's sort of a thumbnail sketch of Richard Allen, or Ricky, as I guess his friend calls him. Currently 52 years old, 44 when the murders occurred. Charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of felony murder. He's a Delphi resident, trained pharmacy technician, worked at the Delphi CVS.
I'm so sorry,
My guess
Pat.
is everyone in town at some point probably came across him, right? I mean, you got to go pick up a prescription or whatever. Married to Kathy Allen and has 1 adult daughter. Married for a long time, has an adult daughter. All that stuff, pretty normal.
Yep, USA.
Which brings me to my next question in our investigation. And it's about the defendant himself. Who is Richard Allen? Who's this guy? Still with us, Barbara McDonald and Bob Mata. Okay, this is an open-ended question. Barbara, I'll let you go first. Who is Richard Allen?
So he seems to have lived a fairly normal life in this area prior to his arrest. No known criminal history. There has been a lot of testimony about his mental health struggles with depression and anxiety. He's been suicidal, he said, for most of the time since about 2015. He was even hospitalized, according to the defense, at one point in 2019 because of his mental health. Previously, when he was being held in solitary confinement in those maximum security prisons, he definitely looked out of it when he came to court appearances. He looks a lot healthier today. He's very engaged with his defense. He looks back at his wife a lot. He winked at her the other day as one of the interrogation videos played that showed them embracing. And he takes a lot of notes.
Bob Mata, who is this guy? If someone came up and said, who is Richard Allen? I mean, how would you describe him?
I'd call him
so it's important to me to point out that since this man has been taken to a different facility, how much better he is doing. He's coherent. He's not, using the restroom on himself in court and trying to eat it right there at the table. You know what I mean? He's more coherent. He's smiling at his wife. He's taking notes. I just, the mental fatigue this man is going through at that facility is horrendous.
Like a Midwestern guy, just a guy who goes to work every day, who's married, raised a kid, seems to be a nice person. I mean, if you're extracting him out of this situation and you're looking at him from, an objective point of view prior to this, I'd say he's kind of an everyman in terms of your typical Midwestern guy. In terms of his relationship with his wife, they love each other. They've loved each other for a long, long time. And the one thing that you gather as you hear the evidence come in, especially interactions between Richard and his wife, Kathy, is that they're still very much in love. They're a very loving couple. And this has been a relationship that spanned decades. And, there was one moment in court recently where one of his attorneys, Andrew Baldwin, I think had either had some water or some spit go down the wrong tube and he was coughing. Now, this is after the court had concluded for the day and Allen was standing right next to him. And like Andy was really having a hard time, like kind of getting the cough, and Richard patted him on the back like 3 times, you know, and it was such a human moment and such a bizarre circumstance. It really kind of showed the humanity that I think that Richard Allen probably has had throughout the course of his life. I think most people that knew him always said he was a nice, quiet guy, you know, and like that kind of one little act, you know, I think he's like, it's been said that he's selfless. So we've got a strange dichotomy here. I mean, if he is in fact the person who did this, then it seems to belie everything that he's been coming into this. So, you know, but I guess the real question is, can you really know anybody?
Right. Yeah, but there are some defendants that come into court and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Right.
I get it. We've seen that. We've covered that trial more than once here on Court TV. I want to show the clip that you referenced, Barbara, in the piece that we showed before. Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, talking about Richard Allen.
There's a report going around right now that Mr. Allen actually processing photos for the family. Do you know if that's accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay, and that he didn't charge the family when they came to claim the photo?
Hold on a minute. I'm going to read this out loud for y'all because I couldn't quite understand what they were saying. Let me take it back just a smidge.
There's a report going around.
There's a reporting going around right now that this Mr. Allen could actually process some of the photos for your family at the CVS. I brought this up when we first started talking about this trial. They had said, or I'd heard somewhere that yes, he processed some of the photos of Abby and Libby at the CVS.
Allen actually processed the photos for the family at the CVS. Do you know if that's accurate?
He says, do you know if that's accurate? And Becky Patty says, yes, that's accurate.
That is accurate. Okay, and that he didn't.
Okay, and that he didn't charge the family when they came in to claim the photos.
Charge the family when they came to claim the photos? That is correct.
That is correct.
And that's one of the things about this story, Barbara. We always say it's a small town. It's a small town. If you're getting your photos processed, you go to the CVS. You're going to know Richard Allen. Like, people know each other and will recognize each other. And we thought all through the years, we were talking about, could the killer be among...
Anders says he had Googled this kidnapping movie. I don't understand what's strange with that. Well, some people could say, like, you're trying to watch the movie to pick up on ways to kidnap somebody. And he could just, you know, like movies like the movie Taken or something like that. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but the correlation would be that he looked that up so he could get basically pointers on how to kidnap somebody.
The folks in Delphi, or was it an outsider? And prosecutors obviously saying it's a man who was living amongst you.
Absolutely. And, you know, he continued to go to work for 5 years after these murders at that CVS right in the middle of town. Didn't hide, didn't move. Law enforcement shopped in there. The families of the victims shopped in there. And nobody ever called law enforcement and said, I think it's the guy at CVS. The only tip that they ever received was from him himself saying, I was out at the bridge that day.
Right. And there was the video and there was a sketch, and there's a picture of Richard Allen with the sketch behind him. And here it is, folks. There's Richard Allen. And then over his right shoulder is a sketch of the suspect in the most notorious case ever to come out of this area. And it's just like another day. Found this on a Facebook page. Bob, we only have literally like 10 seconds here, but what are your thoughts about how all of that could influence this, that there isn't a past?
You know, sometimes people that do horrible things have no criminal history, you know, so I don't think it ultimately is going to really play into how this thing shakes out.
All right. Barbara McDonald, Bob Mata. Wow. What a story. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
Hello, Hunter's Moon. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. we are seeing what Mr. Vinnie Politan has to say about this trial. I'm going to let it play the music. It always makes me think it's a second episode when he does this intro again.
Of the Delphi murders. 2 young girls from Indiana had a day off from school. But what should have been a fun day turned into a tragedy of epic proportions. Their throats were slashed, and a killer was on the loose for half a decade. Here's the story. Teenagers Abby Williams and Libby German were best friends, living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana.
USA Libertarian says when he made that search, I wonder if there was a popular kidnapping movie out. When I heard that he searched that, it immediately brought the movie Taken or Taken 2 to mind. It would be interesting to correlate the time of when he searched that to the time that those movies came out, because it wasn't that long ago, especially with Taken 2. And, you know, it was a good movie. A lot of people, I watched it. I don't find it unusual.
On February 13th, 2017, the girls had a day off from school, so they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and while on that bridge, Libby recorded a man with her phone uttering the words, "Down the hill." It was down the hill where Abby and Libby would be murdered. Prosecutors say the man on the bridge is responsible, and they believe that man is Richard Allen. But Allen and his attorneys say prosecutors have it all wrong. They say Allen is innocent, and it was someone else on the bridge that day who took the lives of these 2 innocent girls. But prosecutors still believe they have direct and circumstantial evidence to prove this case. And now the families and the public wait for the answer. What is the truth? And will Abby and Libby get justice?
So in this case, the direct evidence would be the alleged confessions of Richard Allen, right? That is him saying, I did it. And here's some of the details surrounding what I did and how I did it. That's the direct evidence. And you can trust it or not trust it if you believe it's a real confession or a false confession. Then you have the circumstantial evidence, those pieces of evidence that if you look at and you kind of put them together, point towards the defendant, Richard Allen. Now, the one piece of physical evidence that looms large for prosecutors in this case that they say puts Richard Allen at the scene of the girl's death is a unspent cartridge or bullet that came out of his gun. So to attempt to prove this, they put on an expert to testify. Melissa Oberg is her name. She's a former Indiana State Police firearms examiner. And
USA says Taken 3 was 2014, Prisoners was 2013. Okay, thank you for that. I think that this happened, I think he was arrested. Okay, I know there's 2015 and 2017, so I'm thinking that I don't remember when he was arrested. It might have happened in 2017 and was arrested later. I'm going to Google when he was arrested and see if there was any kidnapping movies that were out that were really popular at the time. That's something I think we need to know. This is going to be important testimony right here.
And here's what she said. She demonstrated how a semi-automatic pistol cycles a cartridge, either automatically if the round has been fired or manually by someone racking the action. She examined an unspent .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Winchester cartridge, which was found at the scene of the crime. She also examined Richard Allen's Sig Sauer MP 226 .40 caliber Smith & Wesson. Okay.
Liddy, yes. They were supposedly, from what everybody thinks, they were going to meet a guy off of Instagram called Anthony Schatz, but it was a picture that somebody was using by the name of Keegan Klein. Keegan Klein was not Anthony Schatz. The Anthony Schatz account, the photos on there were from a supermodel. I don't know where, and he was like traumatized to learn that his pictures had been used for that. Keegan Klein was the person who was supposed to meet them that day.
Okay, these are the conclusions that she came to. The cartridge at the crime scene had 3 ejector marks on the head, 3 extractor marks under the rim. There were miscellaneous marks on the primer and various particles in the rim around the primer. She compared it to a fired round from Allen's gun to the bullet found at the scene, which was not fired, and identified 3 specific places where the markings matched. She says she was confident the .40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge found at the crime scene had been in Richard Allen's gun. That's how they put him at the scene. Here's our next question relative to this evidence, which is, how strong is the gun evidence?
Sorry, guys. Okay, so I have this pulled up. Let me share this with you real quick, and then we'll pull back up that video. So what this tells me, I said, was there a popular movie about kidnapping that came out in 2021 or 2022? Because if he's searching it on Google, it might have come out in 2021 and he's trying to watch it in 2022 or something like that. So this movie, A Kidnap, came out in 2022. Kidnapped came out in 2021. That's it's a movie review. No Exit was a 2022 film, and I think I saw a video about that. I think I remember seeing previews for this movie, No Exit. Yeah, they've even got a trailer on YouTube. It's a survivor thriller movie. So I would think maybe he was looking up this movie, No Exit, if he was indeed trying to find a movie. And that was why he pulled that up. Great questions and great thought processes, you guys. You guys are on the ball today. As soon as this comes up, there we go. Keegan is gross, Pat.
I just read it to you. We need to decipher it, figure out what it means, and put some context and perspective on it to really evaluate how strong it is. With us to break it all down, firearms expert, studio armorer for more than 30 years, and author of the guidebook Prop Gun Safety for Film and TV, Dutch Merrick is with us, and criminal defense attorney, host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Mata, who's inside that courtroom for this trial. Dutch, I want to begin with you. I just read a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo.
Personalization. I'm going to use the X-Tool P2 to do all the heavy lifting, get all of my cuts.
USA says, isn't the movie The Shack about a kidnapping victim? I don't know. I don't know if I've heard of that movie. That's a good question. Thank you.
About all of this. It's the expertise. You're an expert. Walk us through this so we understand this process and how these markings can end up on a cartridge, an unspent cartridge versus a fired cartridge, and kind of explain it to us.
So it's important to get back to the basics of how a bullet works. A cartridge, which is all 4 elements of a round, is the bullet, which is the projectile, a primer, which...
If you guys are here or watching the replay, if you don't mind, take a second to hit that thumbs up so that we can get out into the algorithm. That'll be the only time I ask you to do that. Thank you so much.
Lights off the gunpowder, and it's all held together by the case. And the case, in this instance, is made of brass. So that entire assemblage goes into the chamber. The chamber holds it snug, and when you fire it, the bullet goes out the barrel. That chamber potentially could leave marks on the case. The chamber is designed to let the bullet come in and out smoothly, but when you fire it, that case does expand a little bit, and then there's an extractor, which is like a little claw that grabs the case at the base and pulls it out of the chamber because it might be in there snugly, and then the ejector is a rod that flips it out of the extractor and tosses it away. So the process of the bullet going in the chamber, the extractor grabs it, and the ejector pushes it further out of the way. But each of those 2 things, the extractor and the ejector, can leave a mark. Those are generally made of steel, and the brass case is softer metal, and it will be marked as it's functioning in the gun.
Okay. Can you demonstrate any of this for us? Just give us a better idea of how all this is working.
Yeah, so I'll switch to my overhead camera here. I have a box of studio dummies that we use for the movies. These are dummy cartridges, and they each have a rattle in them, and I'll rattle it for the microphone. You might be able to hear that. So I've tested each of these. These are dummy rounds. I'm going to chamber one into this. This is not the same pistol. I didn't have access to a P226 this quickly. So this H&K USP will function very similarly. I'll take the magazine, put it in the grip, and when I chamber around, you can see it go from the magazine into the chamber. And then when it ejects, it pulls it out of the case and shoots it out. So inside the gun, you'll see this is the extractor rod that pulls out the case, and then the ejector rod is the one that pushes it off of the extractor. And it's important to note the base of the cartridge has a little notch here so that it can be grabbed by the extractor.
So when you put it
Hopefully
in,
that
let me ask you a question really quickly. So when you placed it in there and then it popped out, is that considered cycling through the gun and it's an unspent cartridge at that point?
That's correct. So you can take a full live cartridge, feed it into the chamber from the magazine, and that has been cycled into the breech. And you can manually eject it by pulling the action open, and that clears the breech. Or you can fire the gun, which is the energy of the cartridge itself that pushes the bullet forward and puts pressure on the case backwards, and it will cycle the round from the energy of a cartridge firing. So there's two ways to do it: manually when you're loading and unloading with your hands, or the bullet itself firing, hence the term semi-automatic firearm. When you pull the trigger, it fires and it rechambers the next round.
All right, one more follow-up, then I want to get to Bob to get the legal aspect of all of this. So what they compared apparently inside the courtroom was a fired cartridge and then an unspent one. And she said she saw similar markings between one that was fired and one that just went in and then popped out, like you demonstrated to us. Would they have the same markings? Would there be any markings that would be similar if they went through seemingly two different processes?
Well, when a gun is fired, there's a lot of pressure and energy, and that case is being beaten back and shot out very aggressively.
Yes, Pat. This person says someone who knew more about ballistics than me said that guns can get rusty inside if you're not diligent about cleaning it, and then it would leave different marks on the bullet. That's absolutely correct.
When you're chambering a gun just with your hands, it's less energy and it's more passive. However, in both instances, they will leave some marks on the brass. I think my opinion is that when you're firing, it leaves more aggressive marks on the brass, more easily discernible. But when you're simply chambering around and that cartridge case is riding up into the extractor little tang, it is leaving a mark nonetheless.
Okay, and one more small follow-up to that. Would those marks be similar, but just different levels of depth because of the pressure, right? Like one
Sarah, it could be YouTube. YouTube has been messing up for some people.
mark would be deeper and perhaps easier to see, and the other one would be a little bit lighter, but the patterns, would you expect to be similar?
Yes, the extractor rod, due to manufacturing imperfections, those each can be individually identified per gun. So an extractor rod in this particular P226 will leave this mark, and another gun that has different wear in it and different manufacturing imperfections will leave a unique mark on that. And again, when you're firing it, it does treat the case more aggressively, and it should leave deeper marks or more readable marks. But even when you're chambering it by hand, it leaves a mark, albeit likely less depth or a little softer marks.
Dutch makes it make sense to me. Bob Motta, let me ask you the ultimate question, though. How strong is this gun evidence? We're used to ballistic evidence in murder cases.
Well, I'm thrilled that Dutch is on here because I've been dying to talk to another gun expert. So I sat in there, and I'm going to add a little X factor for you, Dutch, and I hope that you can answer the question. So when Melissa Oberg, the firearms examiner, did her testing, okay, she took 10 rounds that she used that they had in the lab there. She grabbed them out. She first tried to cycle 4, which you showed us for all of us to see what a cycling is, where she just racked the gun and ejected 4 of them. None of those 4 rounds that she did that to left significant enough marks for her to make an examination of any of those rounds. That's when she decided to resort to firing the next 6 rounds. And it was one of those that she decided to make the comparison to, and that's where she found that there was a sufficient agreement. So, I mean, in my world, if the story has been, we have 3 ejector marks on this particular round, which means that we know the bullet's still in there. The projectile is still in there. So that tells us that that particular round had been cycled through, as you showed us here on live TV, or, you know, that they're popping out like that. And we have a situation where she did the very testing that they're alleging must have happened, because it's still an unspent casing at the time that they find it. So obviously it was never.
Hi, Byington. It's nice to see you, and thank you for being here today. Richard Allen said, Byington says, Richard Allen said he carried a gun when hunting mushrooms out there. Could he have ejected it then? It's very possible. My question is, I mean, again, it's in the ground at a 45-degree angle. So I don't feel like it happened that day. I feel like it happened several days, weeks, or possibly even months beforehand.
Shot. How is that? How am I supposed to make those two things make sense in terms of we've got her doing the same act?
Which again, if he was out there hunting mushrooms, could have happened at any point in time, way before any of this horrific stuff ever even was thought of in the universe.
But yet it didn't leave significant enough markings for her to make a comparison, and she has to resort to firing it in order to get a mark that she could try to make a comparison with.
Yeah, how about that, Dutch?
So, yeah, absolutely. And I had the same question when I heard the testimony that there were 3 cases that she manually fed that didn't leave a mark. And so discussions that I've had with other professionals, it seems in shooting situations like that, well, first of all, how did the unfired round end up near the bodies or near the crime scene? And any manner of thing could have happened. He could have cycled an extra round at the beginning to chamber it. He could have had a jam or didn't feed, and then he aggressively cycled it. And I think the thing is if you're in a panic and you're in a very stress-induced moment, you might cycle that gun very hard to get it clear. You might do it very aggressively. And if this investigator did a gentle cycling, it's far less likely to leave a mark. So that's the how I'm making a mental connection in the gap there between the unmarked cases that she tried in controlled circumstances and what happened at the crime scene.
Dutch Merrick, nobody does it better. Thank you so much. When we come back, what was revealed?
But again, I have to question the fact that you couldn't rule out the neighbor's Sig Sauer either. I don't like that testimony or that evidence because it's just not certain enough, in my opinion. Allegedly speculating.
Revealed in the recorded calls.
Downhill.
I was muted. I said we need to watch that one when it comes.
In October of 2020.
Sorry about that, you guys.
22, surprisingly, we got word that there was an arrest.
What? Disbelief. Like, okay, I'm hearing this, but it's a process.
Like the rest of national media,
Hunter's Moon, I think his alibi was that he went there and walked that day, but then he went home. I don't know if his wife was there or not. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, I was.
Showed up to watch that press conference to announce the arrest, not knowing what to expect.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion
You'll have to watch it, Joy.
of this long-term and complex investigation.
We expected to be excited and happy and overjoyed that he's arrested, but now we're dealing with understanding that
there's a lot of reopening wounds that's coming with that.
And that was really the beginning of the next chapter of this story in this case. And things have happened since the arrest of Richard Allen that are sort of different, that you don't see in a lot of cases. But there are these confessions, and some of them are recorded. Brian Harshman, Indiana State Police, take a look at this, monitored Richard Allen's communications after his arrest. 700 phone calls. He says Allen made incriminating statements and calls to his mother and his wife. He says in the calls, Richard Allen is calm, subdued, solemn. Allen's rate of speech is consistent between making confessions and talking about other matters. Didn't think Richard Allen was under duress when he made confessions during these calls. He believes that Richard Allen is the voice that we were listening to for years of the bridge guy. So that brings us to our next question in the investigation. It's all about these calls, which are recorded. What was revealed in the recorded calls? Here to discuss, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald and Bob Mata still with us. I want to read partial transcripts from two of the calls. November 13th, 2022, call with Kathy Allen. That's his wife. Richard, what they want me to say, I'll say it. I can't explain what's going on. I'll say whatever they want me to say. I'll see you in another life. Then you go to April 3rd, 2023, call with Kathy Allen. Richard, I wanted to apologize. Richard, I did it.
I'm sorry, I thought I was muted. I was getting some bread because I'm hungry. I'm about to eat some bread with butter on it. USA Libertarian says, in a case where we seem to be so concerned about confusing the jury, right? Yeah. There's a question here about the sister. I need to find that where they question about some of the things the sister did. But again, shock or denial, like Pat says. Yeah, Joy says these small towns and their secrets. Exactly.
I killed Abby and Libby. Kathy, no, you didn't. Richard, yes, I did. I don't know why. Kathy, why would you say that? Richard, because maybe I did. Kathy, they are messing with your mind. Barbara McDonald, that's just.
I mean, and notice the use of the term maybe. Richard says, because maybe I did, not because I did, because I know I did, because I remember doing it. He says, maybe I did. And then again, she says, they're messing with your mind. I agree. That's what I would have said.
Just a transcript. Paint the picture for us of what these things sound like and what you're hearing as they're being played.
Well, I disagreed a little bit with the witness. I didn't think that he sounded so calm and solemn in these calls. I thought many times he sounded quite emotional. He got very choked up at times. You could tell that he was crying and sometimes even sobbing as he talked with his wife. She also was very emotional in talking with him. We heard that these calls were all in the vicinity of about 30 minutes. But I believe the longest one that was played in court was about 10 minutes. And they did play the complete calls of the 7 calls they chose to play. Bradley Rosie, Richard Allen's lead defense attorney, said that all of the confessions were very generic, and they did sound very generic. Things like, I did it. I want you to know I did it. Or I killed Abby and Libby, but without providing any detail or explanation for why he might have done that.
Bob, what are you hearing as these are being played inside the courtroom?
It was surreal to kind of be sitting in there and listening to it, and we obviously had the ability to be able to hearken back to when they played the interrogation videos to really try to compare and contrast his kind of tone, tenor, speech pattern in those interviews where he was adamantly professing his innocence, where he was adamantly saying, look, I'm not going to be a fall guy in this thing. And to hear this and to kind of have the background of what was going on psychologically with him in terms of, you know, this state of psychosis that he was in, and learning that he had Haldol injections. So you have that kind of background, and you're listening. And obviously, as a defense attorney, I'm trying to listen to see, can I trust it? You know, are there details in the places where we're actually hearing him speak, as opposed to somebody else?
Right. USA said, I have family members who have passed, and I wake up from dreams about them thinking they're still alive. Yeah, it is. And Pat, yeah, I would. I mean, I'm sorry, USA. Yeah, that's a horrible thing, but I have had dreams like that too, about someone I was very close to that passed away. I wanted to let y'all know that Basil just came running in, and he jumped on the bed, and he's eating a piece of bread with me with butter on it now. So he's good. He came running in, so he's good. He had me a little worried for a minute.
Writing down his words, that is somebody that works in that prison, you know, and I agree with Rosie. They are all very generic. I did it. In almost every statement that we heard, or every call, it's one point or another during the conversation, he says that I think I'm losing my mind, or I've lost my mind. You know, so it's like you can hear that he's just going through it. You know, I mean, they're like, anybody that's listening to this and is being intellectually honest, and they understand the conditions of his incarceration in a prison for 13 months in solitary, and they're not taking into account that would affect him mentally, I think is just being dishonest with themselves. So, like, I'm hearing a broken man is what I'm hearing. That's the way that I feel about it.
I have some more.
Me too. I think a lot of people are feeling that way about it. Byington says, I see a little guy already having mental issues, locked up, suffering for verbal abuse from inmates and staff. And I couldn't agree more.
And I'm going to go May 10th, 2023, a call with Kathy Allen. Richard, I just think maybe I've lost my mind. I need to say something anyway. I need you to know that I did this. May 20th, again, with his wife. I need to know that you still love me, baby. I may have to spend the rest of my life in here. I might only get to see you one last time if I get the electric chair. Barbara, we have about 20 seconds or so here. Give us more of the context of the timeline of this and where he is.
The majority of these calls all happening between April and May of 2023. This was after he had already been in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison for 5 months, away from his family, wasn't allowed in-person visits, wasn't allowed to get out in daylight, wasn't allowed to go out in the yard for rec time, and at times was being treated against his will for those psychosis symptoms that he was exhibiting, according to the psychologist.
Barbara McDonald, Bob Mata, incredible insight. Thank you both so much. The evidence in this case is not overwhelming. There are problems, but
there certainly are. I think any of us would be broken after 5 months in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison.
If you take it at face value, there's more than enough. The timeline seems to work. The videos, they're grainy, but they can sort of match it up. The ballistics we talked about, and yes, the confessions. The question is, however, will a jury take the evidence at face value, or will they not trust it beyond a reasonable doubt? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers.
Okay, I've got time to do one more of his. USA says, especially being a smaller guy, would probably feel extra vulnerable and with basically no time to acclimate to prison. Right. Hunter's Moon said, I would lose my faculties too, right? I sure would. Pat says, Haldol does calm you down, but you can have serious side effects from it. I had it once and got lockjaw. They gave it to me once at the hospital, and they gave me some to take home, and I took one pill, and I could not even get up to use the bathroom for 3 days. Like, I flushed it as soon as I could get up and, you know, had a grasp of what was going on around me. I flushed that bottle down the toilet. I was like, and I told them, I said, don't you ever give me nothing like that again. That mess was insane. Oh, let me mute his music. So this is going to be Again, Vinnie Politan Investigates. It's Delphi Murders, Richard Allen, Mailbox Man, and Brad Weber by Vinnie Politan Investigates.
Is the Delphi Murders, a brutal crime in a small Indiana town involving two young girls, best friends, who had their throats slashed. Prosecutors say it was a local CVS worker who did it, but the defense says it was a ritualistic killing by a group of Odinists. Here's the story. It was an unseasonably warm February day in 2017 in the small rural town of Delphi, Indiana. It's not a place where you worry when your teenage kids decide to go on an adventure outside. So when Abby Williams and her best friend Libby German decided to go on a hike near the Monon High Bridge in the middle of the day, no one thought it was dangerous. But when Libby and Abby didn't show up for their ride home, their families began to worry and they began to search. Then the next day, it was the worst news possible. The bodies of these two girls were found, both victims of murder, their throats slashed, one girl naked and the other wearing her friend's clothes. As the investigation progressed over 5 years, there were sketches of the suspect that actually looked like two different people. And there was a video, a grainy video of the killer. Then finally,
the fact that the jury is not being allowed to see the sketches of what appears to be two different people is really devastating, in my opinion, as well.
an arrest of the accused murderer, Richard Allen. Allen says he didn't do it, and he also alleges it was a group of Odinists who were actually responsible. But prosecutors believe they have the evidence to convict, including 61 alleged confessions. Will the truth come out, and will Abby and Libby get justice? So in this case, Richard Allen from the beginning has said he's not guilty, right? In his original interrogation and every time in court. But prosecutors say he confessed 61 times. But getting back to his denial that he is, not that you can't prove it, that he's factually innocent, that means someone else would be responsible for all of this. And that raises the specter of, like, well, who else could it potentially be? Who else was there that day? I want you to take a look at this. Teresa Liebert testified, called actually by the defense in this case, is someone who lives there, lived near a gate on the southern end of a private drive leading to Brad Weber's property. Okay, and this is near the Monon High Bridge. The drive passes beneath the Monon High Bridge east of Deer Creek and ends near Weber's property. On around 8:30 a.m. on February 13th, 2017, that's the day of the murders, the morning of the murders, Teresa saw a man she'd never seen before standing near a mailbox. She didn't get a good look at him. It just seemed strange. I pulled out of the drive and got out of the car, and he was gone. Right? This isn't you're not in the middle of a big town.
That's interesting. If he was just like creepily standing there, we do have to question, did he stand in the woods until they got there? Was he texting with them, and then when they got there and got to the point where he was at, if he came out of the woods? But I mean, again, it could be absolutely nothing, just somebody walking by or something.
This is a very rural area, big pieces of property. It's wooded.
Oh, Anders.
The houses are separated from one another.
That was weird.
So you've got a guy who's there the morning of. She thought it was a little suspicious because she's never seen him there. Why would he be there? And that brings us to our first question of our investigation tonight. Who is the mystery mailbox man? Like, who is this guy? What was he doing there? Why was he in this area? Let's get to some of the details. Joining us to discuss all this, Court TV's senior producer, Barbara McDonald, and criminal defense attorney and host of Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Mata. Both of them in Indiana, both of them inside that courtroom. Thank you so much for being here. Let's start, Bob, the mailbox. Who is this guy, this mailbox man?
We don't know. We don't know. There was no real identification of him. It doesn't look like law enforcement really followed up on the tip much. that was kind of the theme with Liebert in terms of, you know, she saw this, she did her best to report it, and there was really no follow-up. That seems to be kind of a running theme with a lot of this investigation. Obviously, the defense is pretty critical of what was done and what wasn't done and what should have been done. So unfortunately, we don't know much about it other than the fact that she came off as very credible, and she didn't come off as somebody who would, you know, basically get a bad enough feeling to call law enforcement and report it without her getting a serious vibe about it. So it's strange. You know, the timing's weird. And then we had another witness that testified shortly thereafter that was talking about another strange situation that also seemed off to him. So it's hard to know, Vinny. We don't know who it is.
So, Barbara, it's 8:30 in the morning in this area. Like, none of us have been there. You've been there. What's going on at 8:30 in the morning near the, this I guess, near this road? Near the Monon High Bridge. I mean, you're not in the middle of a town, are you? It's kind of
No, you're actually some distance away from town. You're a couple of miles from where the high school is located. And this happens to also be the road leading to this mailbox area where Abby lived. She lived further down on the road, perhaps a half a mile away. But this is all on the south end of that bridge, southeast side of the bridge.
So this is showing us, well, it doesn't show us where Abby lived at, though. I'm wondering where this driveway was. Unless it was at the end of the access road. That's interesting. That this man was standing there and it was at the end of Libby's driveway, almost.
Bridge. And yeah, there's only a handful of houses back there. The road leading to the private drive has maybe 3 or 4 homes on the left-hand side. And then when you get to the private drive, you can either continue on that private drive or you can turn to the right, and there's a couple of more houses over there, but they're not particularly close together. And there's a huge field right there as well.
Did you or a loved one use Depo-Provera shots and later developed a brain tumor or a meningioma? New research suggests Sorry about that, y'all. Hold on just a minute.
It's not the mailman. On the cross-examination, she was asked, so you're telling us around 8:30 a.m. on this day, you and your husband were coming home and saw a man you had never seen before, but you didn't see his face or a photo of him. And she answers, yes. And there was also a question from the jury on this as well. And the jury's asking, because there was no school on that day, and that's why Abby and Libby are there, right? Could the person by the mailbox have been a student? And she said no.
That's interesting, and what a great question from the jury. Bellis, you told me about that, and I know you're telling somebody else now, but I'm again sorry to hear about that. That's awful.
So, Bob, let's get back to this. So there's someone that is not recognizable. This is like an area where you kind of know your neighbors, I would think, because there's only a handful of them.
Yeah, it's very rural. I actually was out there again today taking some drone footage, sending the drone creeping around in areas that I can't walk. So, and it is very, very rural. And, you know, I mean, Delphi in and of itself, like you said, I mean, it's a small town. I've been here for a couple of weeks and I feel like I know everybody around the courthouse in terms of the businesses, in terms of the very kind sheriff deputies that are taking care of the court. I mean, it's that kind of town, you know what I mean? So you're going to know people that are living in town. And when she doesn't recognize this guy, and she got a pretty good look, it sounded like. I mean, she didn't give much of a description. So, you know, when they asked her if she had seen a picture, I think the inference was obviously, or you know, does he look like Bridge Guy? So when she answered that affirmatively, I think it kind of might have thrown people off. You know, so it's at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know how much it's going to give the jury to kind of hang their hats on, other than the fact that it's kind of establishing that there were other people in this area all day. And the one thing that we know, if we're to believe Richard Allen, he was at his mom's house and is, visiting with his mother in the morning that day. So he wasn't there, so we know it's not him.
Barbara McDonald, there's another name that's been talked about from the beginning, Ron Logan, who lives in that general vicinity, right? Near the bridge and the property. The girls are found on his property. Is there any sense that this could have been Ron Logan out for a walk in the morning, hanging out by a mailbox? Would this neighbor have known him?
She probably would have, because most of the neighbors around that area do all seem to know each other. They are people who've owned those properties for very long periods of time. Brad Weber is younger, but his mother owned the property he lives in prior to him. And, one of the stories that Ron Logan had told me is when he had a lot of horses, his horses would frequently get off of his property and they would run across the creek over to those properties. And those people all knew, oh, these are Ron's horses, and would call him and he'd go out and round up his horses. So I would imagine that she would have known him. I have not spoken to her myself.
I would think so too. I know people in the area, if their cows get loose or, I lived in several different places and I knew the neighbors. So I would definitely think she would have known if it was him, and she would have said so. It was probably someone who was looking suspicious. That's why she turned around and checked at the end of the driveway when they were gone, and somebody she probably hadn't seen before.
Myself and asked her that question, but most of the people in that area are familiar with each other.
Sure. And do we know where Ron Logan was early that morning?
That morning, he had gone to the transfer station to drop off some trash. He said that he had a lot of trash bagged out in his property that somehow animals had gotten into, and he had spent the morning collecting that trash and then taking it to the transfer station where he was seen on cameras, I believe around the 11 o'clock hour.
And here, Bob, the other thing that surprised me about this, and I'm not saying that this mailbox man necessarily is a suspect or potentially the killer, but this was the biggest case ever in this area, like ever. And it was unsolved for 5 years. So I would think like everyone who had been spotted anywhere near there during the course of the day, especially the men, there would have been a lot of follow-up to identify all of them, just to kind of eliminate them as potential suspects. That's the part I don't quite understand here, Bob.
Yeah, and you're preaching to the choir, and it's that type of.
I think everybody has a problem with that. Anybody who looks into this case has a big problem with that because they focused in on Richard Allen and just knew it was him and threw every other explanation, interview, and possible theory out the damn window, which is so frustrating.
Of investigation where you're just seeing the gaping holes in terms of the amount of time that went by. In a perfect.
I don't know, Hunters, but the trash, if he took it at 11, that would have been before what happened. And the only thing they would have been looking for possibly in the trash, even if it happened afterwards, would have been the knife. I'm not sure if that was collected or not. There wouldn't have been anything of evidentiary value in there, more than likely. Oh, maybe Libby's clothes, though. That could have been there. But again, it was at 11 o'clock before the supposed crime happened. So, or supposedly before the crime happened. Sorry.
Example of it is that, here in Indiana, they're allowed to ask jury questions, which I love. I think they're so insightful. It gives us so much information about kind of what's going through these jurors' heads. And with respect to the vehicle, whether or not, this is Richard Allen's 2016 Ford Focus in this photograph, the jury asks the question, well, during your investigation, did you ever pull the data on how many Ford Focuses were in the area? And then he says no. And then 2 days later, while we're in the middle of trial, they run and pull the information. And then they put him back on the stand and say, hey, that thing you suggested, well, we went and did it. And this is the results. It's kind of the running theme, man. It's the running theme of what's been going on with this investigation.
I had the same reaction Vinny just did.
Right. And it's not a situation where he's arrested right away so you don't follow up with other potential people because it's irrelevant because you solved the crime. The crime wasn't solved for 5 years, which means you should be turning over every leaf, every stone, especially in light of the nature of this case. This could be a madman who could take other people's lives. I mean, this wasn't like domestic violence. No, this was two innocent girls going for an innocent hike and their throats were slashed in a brutal, horrific murder. There's a mad killer on the loose. We need to catch him. And we're not doing everything possible. It's a little frustrating. Okay, coming up.
A little?
Next.
Just a little.
Who was making the decisions about Richard Allen's custody?
Great question.
The arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
Right before an election as well. I mean, I hate to keep bringing that up, but I think it's pertinent. Oh, hold on. I thought I skipped it. Okay.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard! You're going to prison for the rest of your life! Shame on you, Richard Allen!
And you see all the security around Richard Allen when he was arrested and brought in and out of courthouses. He's the treatment of Richard Allen prior to this trial, the pre-trial incarceration has been an issue. And it's an important issue for 2 reasons. One is how he was treated. Was it appropriate? But the other part is, did it in any way impact his state of mind and contribute to confessions that the
Starry Nights and Fireflies, I know you're probably back at the beginning and watching, but I did want to tell you, hey, and thank you for being here. I'm 14 minutes through this 43-minute interview by Vinnie Politan, and then we'll be done. But thank you for being here. I just want to say thank you. And something is so funny, Auntie Bev. Thank you for being here. Something is so funny, Auntie Bev says, long investigation does not equate to good or even adequate investigation. Kicking out the FBI tells me so much. Me too, love. Me too.
The defense alleges are false confessions. That's why it's important to clear all of this up about this pretrial incarceration of Richard Allen. Take a look at this. Richard Allen was held at the Westville Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison. Okay, I get the maximum security. He's an accused madman, right? Took the lives of 2 innocent girls. But solitary confinement for 13 months? For 13 months. And remember, at this point in our system of justice, while he is incarcerated because the charges are that serious and he's potentially dangerous, he's still.
Zayo, I don't, I try to make it a point not to put Cash App or Venmo or PayPal on here, just to make sure I'm following the YouTube terms of service. I appreciate you asking. If you want to, buy a membership or do a super chat, I have all of those things, but that's all that I'm going to probably ever have. But thank you for asking. And thank you guys for telling everybody, hey, I appreciate that y'all do that.
Still presumed innocent. The cell that Allen was housed in is usually used for inmates who are being punished. They are usually placed in the cell for days or at most weeks. Is that like being put in the shoe? Allen was on suicide watch and always accompanied by suicide companions who logged everything he said and did. He was monitored via.
Okay, Zayo, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Yeah, I'm going to get YouTube Premium. Just getting a little personal, I guess, and putting my information out there. I'm still setting up, like getting paid from YouTube for the first time. As soon as I do, I'm going to set up YouTube Premium through that account, like to make sure that, you know, my payments from what I do on YouTube is going to pay for what I do on YouTube, basically. But thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
A video camera constantly. The former warden from that correctional facility said in his 28-year career, he's never seen anyone held in there for that long. But the people who are usually held in there are convicted killers, not accused killers. They're usually in the jail, but he wasn't. And then the conditions that he's being held in, very unusual even for a convicted killer. So that brings me to my next question. And it's about the pretrial incarceration. Who was making the decisions about Richard Allen's custody? Who's deciding what he's allowed to do, what the conditions are?
Looking for the perfect remote job?
Oh, really, Sarah? That's cool. I'm not a student. I wish I was. I need to go back to school.
Solitary, lights on, all of that. Still with me, Barbara McDonald and Bob Mata. An important question. So, Bob, how does this usually go down?
Well, I mean, typically you have pretrial detainees held in the county jail, whatever county they've been arrested in. They're typically kept there.
They certainly are. You know, back in my younger days when I was acting a straight fool, I had been to county jail and there were people that had been there for 2 and 3 years waiting to go to trial. That's exactly what happens. And that's why it's weird to me that they moved him to max security. Something is so funny said, my hubby works in a maximum security facility, and the extended unaliving watch is not standard. Dr. Walla is to blame for so much of this, in my opinion, and I think we all agree here with that statement that she is to blame for a lot of this.
It's pretty rare to have pretrial detainees, people that are presumed innocent, to be in prison, which is where convicted felons go, and to have them there for 13 months. And then to have them there for 13 months in solitary is frankly unheard of.
What if they're on suicide watch, though? What if there's an actual concern that he might take his own life?
Yeah, I mean, they'll keep him in SEG for a bit, but this was a whole different level. This A-pod that he was in was like the worst of the worst are going there. So that the people that the inmates that they weren't able to keep in Gen Pop because of behavioral issues or other things that may have gone on, and they just can't control them. This is where they put them. So he's in the worst of the worst. It was referred to as the hole, as you kind of aptly noted. You know, it's exactly what you're thinking it is. It is the most secure cell in the most secure prison in the state of Indiana. And really what was kind of running this thing is he was what they call a safekeeper. So they had entered an order early on without him having an opportunity to get in front of a judge, by the way.
So the hole, like I've described before, is going to be a cell. I'm not even sure if it has a sink and a toilet. But there's going to be no mattress. He was on unaliving watch, so he would have been put in the turtle suit, which is basically a green Velcro dress type thing, and he's completely nude under that. There's a drain in the middle of the floor, from what I understand. I've never been there, and he doesn't have his pad, which is like a thin mattress that you sleep on, or blankets or anything. There is nothing. He is in there in this turtle suit in the nude, and there's a drain in the floor. The rest of it is all concrete, from what I understand.
By the way, with this safekeeping order that was entered early on in the case, at that point, that's when they move him from Carroll County, and that's when he gets put up in Westville in November. So from that point forward, he never leaves SEG for 13 months, no matter what was going on with them mentally.
Oh, thank you, Zio. That was so sweet of you. Zio says, thank you for the content and thank you for the kindness. The diverse conversation keeps me intrigued. That was so sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. You're so sweet. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. Something is so funny, Ani Beb said, after 10 days and still a risk to themselves leads to a transfer to a facility with more psych services. Walla didn't want that, whether for her hobby or for a possible book deal, whatever. Wow, I didn't know that. That is crazy, and probably very possible, in my opinion. She wanted to keep him in front of her to get all the information she could. Jenny says they drove him to insanity. Yeah. Okay. Sarah says, I think he had a toilet with a sink on it. Okay, so that's interesting. He at least had that. That's good. Some of them don't. Thank you again, Zio. That was super sweet.
And then it became an issue of, look, there's a policy in place that says, a DOC policy that says, look, if you've got somebody that is under suicide watch, you can't keep them in seg for more than 30 days. But what you had was this battle between the safekeeping order and the policy of the prison not to keep somebody that is on suicide watch or going through a serious mental illness, which he was by the time they diagnosed him with it, in seg for this period of time. So the safekeeping order was winning out. That's what kept happening. The defense tried to fight it on 2 different occasions, and then they finally got him.
It's really
out
the
on
judge
third.
who has some level of control here. I want to put this up because Deanna Dwenger, Dr. Deanna Dwenger, Indiana Department of Corrections Behavioral Health Director, testified that did not determine which DOC facility Richard Allen stayed in, does not know why Richard Allen was placed in Westville. Richard Allen being on camera at all times concerned her. She recommended that the cameras be removed to improve his mental health. Cameras were not removed. Richard Allen was diagnosed with serious mental illness. DOC policy is someone with serious mental illness should not be in solitary confinement for more than 30 days. Restrictive housing can be toxic to the welfare of mentally ill patients. The team determined that Richard Allen was deteriorating enough that intervention was required regardless of whether or not he was faking or genuine. Haldol was given to Richard Allen involuntarily to help with the symptoms of the psychosis. So Barbara McDonald, this is all incredibly significant because of the things that he is saying at the time. And not only, it goes beyond his...
Because you can't take a confession from a person who is not only being subjected to things that aren't even supposed to be happening per the mental health coordinator of the whole entire state of Indiana, number one. Number two, the psychosis and all of the other things that he was going through prove that you can't take his confessions as fact. In my opinion.
His health, it's impacting the evidence against him in the trial.
Yeah, I mean, the cameras were not only on him all the time when he was in the cell, but whenever they took him out of the cell to take him to a shower or to an appointment with the therapist or wherever they needed to take him inside that prison, they had a guard with a camcorder recording him then too. So he literally was on camera all the time while he was in custody. And the defense is introducing some of those videos. They tried to get them in today. There were some issues about the dates of those videos. They're getting that worked out today, we understand.
Not all the time, because they don't have his confessions recorded, which is questionable at best.
And we could see those videos as early as tomorrow.
Yeah, it seems relevant and something the jury should be able to see. Bob, we only have like 15 seconds here, but have you ever seen a pretrial detainee under these conditions?
No, simple answer, never.
I haven't either. And I mean, you cover serious cases with, you know, very dangerous criminals, but I've never seen anything quite like this. All right, Barbara McDonald, Bob Mata, thank you. We've got more to get to. I'm Vinny Politan. You know we'll keep digging for the answers as the investigation continues.
Let me mute my music. His music, I mean. Something is so funny. Auntie Bev says, I am in a semi-related field to Walla, and I'm just completely disturbed by her involvement in this case. Huge ethical concerns. We were just talking about that. There is several ethical concerns. The fangirling, the YouTube, and all of the podcasts, all of it. I mean, I feel like she led him to do a lot of those confessions.
We continue our investigation of the...
So that she could talk about it on, oh, you know, call up a YouTuber. Oh, he said something else today. Guess what he said today? Guess what he said today? I mean, it just, the validity of the case is at jeopardy, all because of her, in my opinion. Because of a lot of reasons, but like you as a professional health person, as a professional would not do that because you're jeopardizing the case. I mean, I question even her degree, because you would know not to do that.
The Delphi murders, a case that is so heartbreaking. 2 young girls enjoying a day off from school ended up brutally murdered in the woods, and locals are all wondering, how could this happen in our town? But then it took 5 years to solve the case, and some believe that this case is still not actually solved.
USA says, how is the jury supposed to weigh those compromised confessions? Hopefully with the videos that they saw of him eating his poo and understanding the psychological deterioration that was going on. I hope.
Here's the story.
Thank you.
Teenagers Abby Williams and Libby German were best friends living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana. On February 13th, 2017, the girls had a day off from school, so they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and while on that bridge, Libby recorded a man with her phone uttering the words, "Down the hill." It was down the hill where Libby and Abby would be murdered. Prosecutors say the man on the bridge is responsible, and that man is Richard Allen. But Allen and his attorneys say prosecutors have it all wrong. They say Allen is innocent, and it was someone else on the bridge that day who took the lives of these 2 innocent girls. But prosecutors believe they have direct and circumstantial evidence to prove their case. And now the families and the public wait for the answer. What is the truth? And will Abby and Libby get justice?
In cases like this, I believe timelines are so important. And timelines in modern criminal courtrooms are established pretty clearly, a lot of times by cell phone data, surveillance video, and other digital footprints that are out there. So these days, we're getting timelines that are much more specific and definitive in cases. I want you to take a look at what we put together here in terms of a timeline. 1:49 p.m., Abby and Libby are dropped off across from Mears Farm, which is located on the north side of County Road 300 North, near the entrance of the trails where they were going to go. At 2:13 p.m., video from Libby's cell phone shows that the girls encountered a man on the southeast portion of the Monon High Bridge. So this is where the encounter begins, 2:13. The video shows the girls walking southeast on the bridge, and this man orders the girls down the hill. 2:32, the last steps on the Apple Watch, Apple Health information from Libby are recorded. And then the girls' bodies are discovered the next day. But this time period, this 2:13 to 2:32, when the last steps are recorded on Apple Health from when they encounter the man, to me this is the most significant portion of the entire timeline. So that brings me to my next question.
You probably know Vistaprint for business cards.
I think timelines are extremely important. That's why I wanted to make sure to pay close attention to all of that.
In this investigation, which is what happened between 2:13 and 2:32 on February 13th, 2017. What happened? What do we know? And what does the evidence lead us to think based upon everything that we've learned in this case? What happened between 2:13 and 2:32? With us to help figure this all out, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald, who's there in Indiana and inside that courtroom, and the YouTube live streamer behind Gray Hughes Investigates, Gray Hughes, who's been covering your story from the beginning, and people have been watching your streams and your podcasts and your investigation of this. So with this question, Barbara, you've been there, you've walked the grounds. 2:13, southeast portion of the Monon High Bridge, to those last steps at 2:32. you've walked the grounds. How long does it take to get from point A to point B? How much time is there for things to happen?
Well, when I walked it,
That is a great question, because it looked like it was about 10 minutes of a walk to me.
I wasn't able to walk all the way across the bridge and do it that way. I was too fearful to walk across the bridge. But at one point, Brad Weber did give me permission to go onto his property. So I was able to walk from the south end of the bridge down the hill to the creek, across the creek onto Ron Logan's property.
See, that's not going to do it for me. I put out a video on my channel of me walking across a bridge that is in no way, shape, or form as big as that one. But it is a railroad bridge like that, similar. And you have to be able to time yourself from the middle of that bridge, off the bridge, and then to the woods, because it's going to be an extremely different amount of time when you add the time to get across that bridge on there, because you have to be very slow about crossing that bridge, like I was in that video that I made for you guys.
Property. And for me, that was about a 10 to 12 minute walk. From Libby's phone data, we do know that between 2:18 and 2:25, no steps were recorded. So there's about a 7-minute period.
I'm so sorry.
0 steps recorded. 2:25 to 2:32, 60 steps are recorded. Now that could fit with what Richard Allen said happened out there, that he had taken them down towards the creek, intending to sexually assault them, eventually got spooked by a van and crossed the creek and killed them over on the other side on Ron Logan's property. The last time that the steps, as you mentioned, were recorded on Libby's phone was 2:32, but the last movement recorded on her phone was at 2:39.
Okay, Gray Hughes, starting to put together all these pieces. What story is the evidence telling you?
That's horrible, Abellis. I hate to hear that. I hope the dad is able to deal with it. That's so sad.
Well, you have Brad Weber. I guess we could start back at let's just start right where the video of the bridge guy was taken. That was it started at 2:13 and 51 seconds. So it's almost 2:14. We keep hearing 2:13, but it's closer to 2:14. So it's 2:13 and 51 seconds. And it's over at 2:14 and 34 seconds. And that's when the video shuts off and they're starting to go down the hill. So that would place them probably on the private drive by, let's just say 2:16 or something like that, because it's just that first little hill down there. And then I would say probably, let's just do another minute or two. So they're 2:18, they're at the low level on the flat below the bridge. And then I personally always had this theory that there's sort of this corner there where you have the private drive and the creek almost kind of merge there.
Eek, I was thinking about the Slender Man case when she said that. I'm sorry to hear that about you too, Eek. I'm sorry.
And I always thought that was a place where he intended to assault them. And then the girls tried to escape and they chased him. But now it turns out that, he took him down the hill there and he was going to assault them. This is what he said in his confession, that, he racked his gun, he took the girls down the hill, and then he was going to assault them down there. But then he got interrupted by a van. And it turns out that Brad Weber, who got off work at 2:02, and he said it takes maybe 20, 25 minutes to drive home. So let's, a couple of minutes to get to the car. So 2:04, add 20 minutes. So you got 2:24 to like 2:29 or so. He's driving by. And if you add that to it, just look at that. The girls go down the hill. They're on the bottom level at like 2:18 with the suspect. And, we're about 6 minutes later is when the van drives by. So he was maybe in the process of, we don't know what he was doing with them there.
Well, what we do know, though, is that one of the girls is found naked. The other girl is found wearing, like Abby's found wearing Libby's clothes and Libby's not wearing any clothes.
Right.
I'm wondering if that's happening in that 218 time period, or if it's happening at the scene where they are ultimately found murdered.
Eek, that is crazy.
What are your thoughts?
I'm glad you're doing better.
Greg?
Yeah, well, it is interesting how, it seems like the phone stopped moving at 2:32 and 39 seconds. So it stopped moving, at least that's what they said. It stopped moving. That's what I have down is 2:32 and 39 seconds. She had a different number there, but I think when he finally got across the creek, he did what he had intended to do on the other side. And I think he, using the gun, forced them to undress. I mean, I hate having to talk about this, but, he forced them to undress. And at some point, he allowed Abby to redress herself. Because I believe, just based on, the crime scene photos, that she was still alive when she was killed after being redressed again. And I think, and that's why there's so little DNA, because I don't know if he actually physically touched like Abby, and other than the stab wounds that he used on both girls that he did.
That's an interesting theory, that she put the clothes back on while she was still alive. But why put on Libby's clothes instead of her own?
On both girls, but he dragged Libby, it seems like, a little bit, so that would be the only time that he would have had to have touched Libby, is just when he moved her a little bit at the crime scene.
Barbara McDonald?
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Barbara, what are your thoughts about the clothing and where it's found? And to me, this is an important part. Like, was this, I've always looked at, was this a sex crime? And what I'm hearing, it sounds like it was perhaps an attempted sex crime that perhaps wasn't completed. But the question is, where was it taking place? On which side of the creek?
Well, all of the clothing was found on the northern side of the creek, the same side of the creek where the girls were found on Ron Logan's property. So it seems to make sense that they likely crossed that creek while still dressed. And then once they got over into the general area of the crime scene, like Grace suggested, that's probably where everything happened. That we did hear testimony that there was no real blood on the clothing that Abby was wearing, except for what was immediately at her neck area. And so the implication is that she was wearing those clothes and laying down when she was attacked.
And
Sarah, I was wondering the same thing.
just want to confirm, so there's no evidence in the first place where he perhaps stops with the girls. There's no evidence or physical evidence that's found there, and no one really knows that exact location?
They never cordoned that off and really searched it the way they searched the crime scene. They searched the area about, I believe it was about a football field size area right where the bodies were found. But there wasn't a lot of searching done on the other side of the creek. There was some, but nothing was found that we know of that relates directly to the murders or to the girls.
Gray Hughes, what lingering questions do you have about this time period that we're talking about here? Things that you would really like to have the answer to that would make it much clearer for everyone, including this jury.
Well, it would be great to have a surveillance shot of Weber's van driving by at a specific time. Then you would know precisely when it was. I'm also kind of curious because it sounds like in Richard Allen's confession that he always said that he had a bullet in the chamber, and then when he was on the bridge that he racked the slide. So that means a bullet would have came out there. Did they ever use a metal detector underneath that bridge to see if there's another .40 caliber bullet under that bridge? And then at the crime scene, maybe you racked it again, and another one was ejected, and that came out on the ground. So, I mean, those are a couple of questions that I have, but it'd be great to be able to absolutely, I know that the defense is really trying to make it argue against Brad Weber's time frame. So they're gonna, if they had some other corroborating evidence, it'd be good. So
yeah, and that's crucial, right? This is, Barbara, this is the moment. Like, Brad's coming home in that white van, and they believe that's what startles him and moves him from one side of the creek to the other, which is a crucial part of all this. Okay, Gray Hughes from Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Thank you so much.
It would be interesting to go out under that bridge with a metal detector to see if there are any more rounds. That is a good thought.
For helping us out again tonight. Barbara's going to stand by. Still to come. What do we know about this guy, Brad Weber?
Great question.
Next week on Opening Statements.
Did a husband kill his wife by setting her on?
And weeknights at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
To the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you.
But wouldn't know because we lost all the interviews. Something is so funny, Auntie Bev says, just sounds like Richard Allen was repeating bits of info he heard from C.O. Zawala, but got some of the key details wrong. Exactly. And I hope the jury sees that. I wish we could.
Or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you. And you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing.
And he was in town, if you believe Richard Allen is the killer, working at CVS. Actually helped process some of the photos for Abby and Libby's memorial. Believe it or not, small town, folks. Small town. Speaking of the small town, Brad Weber, an important witness in all this.
That was the kind of stash to get up, take a walk, and take care of some business. That's what kind of stash that was on that officer.
This property close to the scene where all this is happening, and was driving his van back that afternoon. What do we know about him? Let's take a look. Brad Weber owns property off of County Road 625 West near the Monon High Bridge. February 13th, 2017, worked the first shift at Subaru near Lafayette.
You're good, Sarah.
From 5:41 a.m. to 2:02 p.m. Then he drove home, took about 20 to 25 minutes, driving a Ford Ecoline van. And it's believed that van drove by, and Richard Allen, according to prosecutors, startled by it and then switched his locations. So that brings us to our next question, because Brad Weber is there at the scene in a white van. What do we know about Brad Weber? What do we know about this guy? Right? Remember, again, I go back to this. This was unsolved for 5 years. So anyone who's in the vicinity of here had to be looked at, had to be investigated. So still with me, Court TV's senior producer, Barbara McDonald, and joining us, criminal defense attorney, host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Mata, both in Indiana, both in the courtroom for all of this. All right, Barbara, I'll go to you. What do we know about Brad Weber?
He's lived in the area a long time. He was working at the Subaru plant down in Lafayette back in 2017. He also owns a business where he has a couple of ATM machines that are located.
This guy, at the very least, is questionable. And I don't understand why they didn't investigate him more thoroughly.
I think one is in a bar. I don't know where the rest of them are or how many exactly he owns, but he also drives around to service those ATM machines and keep them in working order and stocked with money, I assume. He was living on his mom's property at the time. His mom, back in 2017, I think, also lived at the property, but most of the time during the winter months, she was living down south somewhere, I think in Arizona, where it's a whole lot warmer. other interesting thing about him, he also owns.
Panel is available. We've only got about, from what it looks like, about 4 or 5 more minutes, and then we're going to be ending this live. But if you guys ever want to jump up, let me know, and I'll drop a link.
A Sig Sauer 40 caliber pistol, semi-automatic, different model from Richard Allen, but same make and same caliber size. And his gun was tested, and the firearms examiner said it could not be excluded prior to the arrest of Richard Allen. She said if she analyzed it again, she would be able to exclude it now.
Wow. Wow. Let me put this up also. Some of the things that you said about owning that Sig Sauer was tested, couldn't be excluded, but then was excluded after they tested Richard Allen's. But a neighbor also said that Weber built a new driveway so he wouldn't have to use the access road that he was on that day. So here's the thing, Bob, like an obvious person to look at, to question, but it does seem, based on the timeline of everything that we're looking at here, he would have an alibi if he's at work at Subaru.
It would seem so. And I think ultimately that was what cleared him. What it shifted to is now he has been, and his van really, they've become the focal point of the state's case. They have decided to put all their chips in. They've gone all in on Brad Weber, and they're using the statement, the most detailed statement that Monica Walla wrote up that she says that Richard Allen said, and they have locked themselves in this timeline. So their time of death now is when the phone stops moving, which is at 2:32, 2:33. So if the defense has been trying to pull in this police report, it's actually an FBI, it's a Fed form, it's a 302, and they tried to get it in through another officer who happened to be partnered up with the Fed, this Agent Poole, and they had interviewed Brad Weber much earlier. And the first time that they interviewed Brad Weber, he said that he didn't go straight home from work, that he actually went and repaired those very ATM machines that Barb was talking about. And then he went home, getting home sometime after 3. So the defense has been adamantly trying to get that into evidence, and Judge Gull has been determined not to allow them to get it in because the cop who was on the stand said, yeah, you refreshed my recollection, and then turned around 5 minutes later and said, oh, no, you didn't refresh my recollection, as to him not coming straight home. So now we know that the defense filed what they call a TUI request, which is where you have a federal agent, or if you're trying to get federal documents in and they're not a party to the case, you're making a request to get that agent in to testify. They tried to get him to be able to testify via Zoom. Judge Gull just today denied that. So because he has some kind of medical issue that didn't allow him to travel he's down in Texas. So that's a battle that's going on, and it's out there, and the jury's heard about these ATM machines, and that there's this potential conflict between when he may have come.
And why wouldn't you let that be entered so the jury has all of the evidence necessary to negate a proper verdict?
Home. Right, and the conflict is between his alleged confession and this white van, which is the corroboration of this alleged confession, and the timeline of when it actually got there. Wow, huge stuff.
Yes.
Barbara McDonald, Bob Mata, thank you both so much. You know, public sentiment has been very divided on this case. You know, inside the true crime community, there's a pretty close split between those who believe Richard Allen did it and those who believe he is some sort of a scapegoat in all of this. Now, the public needs to see the judge did a major disservice by not allowing cameras inside this courtroom.
Right.
When you have a divide like this, you want to trust the verdict. Right. You need to see the evidence, because whatever the verdict is, it'll be questioned and not trusted by a large portion of the community. Exactly. And that's unfortunate. I'm Vinny Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation.
You know, I don't think either way that the verdict comes out, there's always going to be those that question the verdict regardless, because like he just said, half of the community split that he did do it, and the other half, like myself over here, says that he didn't. I just don't think there's enough evidence to corroborate him being your guy. And I do think he is some kind of scapegoat. I question what other activities could have been going on in the town between the sheriff and other people, like what we're seeing with the sheriff that shot the judge. There was a lot of backdoor dealings going on in that town, and it ended up leading to something like what happened when the sheriff shot the judge. I need to look into that more as well. I was just thinking about that earlier today. I am going to have to go for today. I've got to start cooking dinner and all of that. But I do want to tell you, I hope you guys have the best day ever. We will definitely be back tomorrow afternoon. I'm thinking I might schedule for about 1:30, or I think 1:30 might be a better time frame for me. So it'll probably be about 1:30 tomorrow. We'll be back. We'll have something to talk about. I'm going to see if I can find anything on the sheriff and the judge, because we haven't talked about that in a while. I hope you have the best day ever, and I want to thank you again for being here. If you are watching the replay, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe so that more people can get to know who we are and come hang out with all of us here at the Speculating Family. Thank you so much for being here again. Thank you again, Zayo, and everybody else, Eek, Jenny, all of you lovely people. I'll tell you bye in chat in just a second, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.